I spent 30 years preserving old films in my Hollywood Hills vault, protecting them from heat, moisture, and time itself. But I never thought to protect them from my wife. The night I discovered someone had been in my climate-controlled sanctuary at 2:17 a.m., I knew my carefully archived past was about to unspool in ways that would destroy everything I thought was real. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. Chapter 1. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't Blythe's perfume on the wrong pillow or a stranger's cigarette in our crystal ashtray. No, it was a single scratch on a film leader, a tram line running vertical where it should have been pristine, like finding a fingerprint on a trigger nobody was supposed to touch. I'd spent 30 years handling film, and another 15 before that handling secrets. In both trades, you learn to read what isn't supposed to be there. That morning in March 2019, standing in my climate-controlled vault beneath our Hollywood Hills home, I was looking at evidence that someone had been in my sanctuary, someone who knew enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be perfect. "Orson, honey, are you coming up?" Blythe's voice drifted down through the reinforced floor. "The Wilsons are here for the Chaplin screening." The Wilsons. Harold and Margaret, both pushing 80, still holding hands like teenagers whenever they thought no one was looking. Every other Sunday, they'd shuffle over from their Spanish colonial 2 doors down, and I'd thread up something from the Golden Age. Today was supposed to be City Lights. Harold had been talking about it all week, how he'd proposed to Margaret right after seeing it in 1972 at a revival house in Westwood. 5 minutes, I called back, my voice steady despite the cold spreading through my chest like spilled developer fluid. I ran my fingers along the film can's edge, feeling for any other disturbances. The hygrometer read a steady 45% humidity, temperature holding at 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Everything perfect, everything precise except for that scratch, and the fact that my security log showed the vault door had been opened at 2:17 a.m. last Tuesday, while I was running a midnight screening of The Third Man at the Egyptian Theater. The vault wasn't just a room, it was a fortress disguised as nostalgia. 20 by 30 feet of poured concrete walls, with specially designed racks holding over 3,000 film prints. 35mm, 16mm, even some 8mm home movies I'd rescued from estate sales. The crown jewels were the nitrate prints, 14 of them, each in its own explosion-proof canister, stored in a separate compartment with its own ventilation system. Nitrate film was like storing dynamite that could spontaneously combust if you looked at it wrong. 1 degree too warm, a little too much moisture, and you'd have a fire that burned underwater. But someone had been here. Someone who knew enough to reset the temperature controls, to handle the films with cotton gloves, to avoid the obvious honeypots I'd left worthless prints in fancy cases meant to distract amateurs. This was no ordinary thief. This was someone hunting. I sealed the can, placed it back in its designated slot row J, position 7, my own cataloging system that existed only in a notebook I kept in a safe deposit box 12 miles away. Then I selected the Chaplin reel, checked it on the rewinds one more time to make sure it hadn't been tampered with, and headed upstairs. The house sprawled across a half-acre lot, all glass and weathered wood, designed in the 60s by some architect who'd clearly been inspired by equal parts Frank Lloyd Wright and paranoia. The living room opened onto a deck that hung over the canyon like a diving board over an empty pool. On clear days, you could see all the way to the ocean. On most days, you could see the smog line hovering like a gray wool blanket over the basin. Harold Wilson was already in his usual spot, the leather recliner that I'd positioned for optimal viewing angles. He wore his Navy veteran's cap, the one with the USS Missouri patch that had faded from black to the color of old newspaper. Margaret sat beside him on the love seat, her knitting needles clicking in a rhythm that always reminded me of a film projector's shuttle. "There's our timekeeper," Harold said, using the nickname the neighborhood had given me. Not because I was punctual, though I was, but because they thought I was preserving time itself in those metal cans. "Sorry for the delay," I said, wheeling out the Ike projector I kept for home screenings. Had to make sure we had the best print. Blythe appeared from the kitchen, carrying a tray of her famous deviled eggs, the ones she only made for what she called important occasions. She'd changed into her screening outfit, Black slacks, cream silk blouse, the pearl necklace I'd bought her in Tokyo 15 years ago when I was ostensibly attending a film preservation conference. She looked perfect, which is how she always looked when she was selling something. "Duncan Smith called again," she said, setting down the tray with practiced precision. "That collector from Palm Springs, he's very interested in seeing your vault." Duncan Smith. The name sat in my mouth like a false tooth. He'd appeared 3 weeks ago at a screening I'd organized for the local film society, introducing himself with an enthusiasm that felt rehearsed. He knew all the right terms: IB Technicolor, dye transfer, acetate versus safety stock, but he pronounced Czechoslovakian wrong when discussing Eastern European animation, a mistake no serious collector would make. "I'll think about it," I said, threading the film through the gate. "He's offering to help with insurance appraisals," Blythe continued, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonably stubborn. "You know we're underinsured on the collection." Margaret looked up from her knitting. "Oh, insurance. Harold keeps telling me we should update ours. These fires every year." "Nothing's going to happen to Orson's films," Harold said with the confidence of a man who'd survived Lady Gulf. "He guards them better than the Navy guarded nuclear codes." If only he knew how literally accurate that comparison was. I started the projector, and Chaplin's little tramp appeared on the screen I'd mounted on the far wall. The Wilsons settled in, Margaret's needles finally still. Blythe excused herself to make phone calls. Real estate never slept, she always said, even on Sunday afternoons. But I couldn't focus on the film. My mind kept returning to that scratch, that 2:17 a.m. entry, the way Duncan Smith had looked at me when he'd asked about propaganda films from the Soviet era with an interest that seemed too specific, too eager. Halfway through the film, I noticed Blythe in the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in hushed tones. She was facing away from me, but I could see her reflection in the microwave door. Her free hand was gesturing short, sharp movements that meant she was negotiating, or arguing, or both. The little tramp was buying flowers for the blind girl when I made my decision. After the Wilsons left, I would need to check every single can in that vault, all 3,000 of them. Because somewhere in that collection was something someone wanted badly enough to risk breaking into the home of a man they should have known better than to cross. The film ran on, Chaplin's balletic movements casting shadows on my wall, while I sat in the dark and planned my first move in a game I hadn't known I was playing. After the Wilsons left, Harold shaking my hand with both of his, Margaret kissing my cheek and leaving a faint lipstick mark that smelled of violets, I told Blythe I needed to do some maintenance in the vault. On a Sunday? She was at her desk in the den, laptop open to what looked like listing photos of a house in Los Feliz. "The Preservation Society dinner is at 7. "This won't take long," I lied. She sighed, the particular exhale she'd perfected over 23 years of marriage, the one that said she was indulging me but keeping score. "Duncan really wants to meet with you. He's talking about donating to establish a preservation fund. What does he do again? For money? Investments. Technology sector, mostly. Made a fortune in server farms or something." She turned back to her screen. "He's liquid, Orson. Very liquid. Liquid. In my experience, people who were described as liquid were usually anything but. They were tied up in shell companies and offshore accounts, their money flowing through channels that would make the Los Angeles River look straight. Back in the vault, I started my inventory at the beginning row A, position 1, the African Queen, a decent 16mm print I'd bought from a library sale in Riverside. No signs of tampering. Position 2, All About Eve, the dialogue track slightly muddy but otherwise pristine. Position 3, Apartment for Peggy, a film nobody remembered except me and maybe 12 other people on Earth. It was tedious work, but tedium had been my friend during my years at the agency. Tedium meant thoroughness. Tedium meant catching the details everyone else missed because they were too bored to look. By the time I reached row F, I'd found 3 more anomalies. A Belgian film noir with new splicing tape on the leader tape I hadn't applied. A canister of educational shorts where someone had reversed the take-up reel, something only someone looking for hidden material would do. And then, in position F7, I found it. Shadows of Progress. a Soviet propaganda film from 1953 that no one had ever heard of because it had never existed, not officially. It was one of several films I'd acquired through channels that weren't exactly Library of Congress approved back when I was stationed in West Berlin and the wall was coming down. Films that contained more than just moving pictures. I held the can up to the light. The edge seal had been broken and reapplied expertly, but not quite expertly enough. The Kodak edge code on the tape was wrong by 2 years. Someone had opened this can, handled its contents, and tried to make it look untouched. My hands were steady as I opened it, 3 decades of muscle memory guiding my movements. The film leader unspooled, and there it was, or rather, there it wasn't. The microdot I'd hidden in the title card's border, a dot no bigger than a period containing the names of 13 double agents who'd been operating in the United States as of 1989, was gone. In its place was a clean splice, professional work that would have fooled anyone who didn't know exactly what they were looking for. The thing about microdots is that they were already obsolete by the time I was using them. Digital had taken over, encrypted files and secure servers replacing the old physical methods. But sometimes obsolete was exactly what you wanted. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways because everyone had forgotten to look for them. Except someone hadn't forgotten. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for. I heard footsteps above Blythe's heels clicking across the hardwood, heading for the bedroom. She was getting ready for the Preservation Society dinner, which meant I had maybe 40 minutes before she'd come looking for me. I pulled out my phone, not my regular phone, but the one I kept in a lead-lined box in the vault, the one that had never been connected to our home Wi-Fi and took photos of everything. The tampered seal, the wrong edge code, the too-perfect splice. Then I dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years. Orion! The voice that answered was like whiskey poured over gravel, unchanged by time. The Odessa files have been compromised, I said. Silence for 5 heartbeats. Then, how many? At least 1. Maybe more. I'm still checking. You know what this means. I did. It meant that someone, somewhere, had decided that 30-year-old secrets were worth excavating. It meant that names on a list that should have been buried with the Cold War were suddenly valuable again. It meant that my quiet life as a film preservationist, my carefully constructed retirement, was over. I need a clean room, I said. Somewhere I can work without interruption. The old place in Chinatown is still available. Keys where it always was. A pause. Orson? Watch your 6. If they found one, they'll come for the rest. The line went dead. I replaced the phone in its box, sealed the compromised can, and marked its position in my mental map. Then I selected 3 more cans films that actually were what they appeared to be and headed upstairs with them under my arm. Blythe was in the bedroom, zipping herself into a black cocktail dress that she'd bought for last year's Academy Museum gala. She looked at the film cans in my arms and frowned. You're not bringing those to dinner. They're for Serafina Garcia at the TCM festival. She asked to borrow them for the spring program. The lie came easily, the way lies always did when they were wrapped in enough truth to seem plausible. Serafina did run programming for the festival, and she had been pestering me about loans. Blythe knew both these facts. Can't it wait until tomorrow? She's leaving for New York in the morning. I'll drop them at her office on the way to dinner. Blythe turned back to the mirror, applying lipstick with surgical precision. Fine, but don't be late. The Johnsons are sitting at our table, and Flynn wants to talk to you about film insurance. He says we're leaving money on the table. Flynn Johnson. Another new face in our circle, another person who'd appeared with convenient expertise just when questions about my collection were arising. The paranoid part of my brain which had kept me alive through 3 years in Berlin, and 7 in places the State Department pretended didn't exist, was starting to see patterns. But paranoia without evidence was just anxiety, and anxiety made you sloppy. I needed proof. I needed to know who was hunting through my collection and what they were really after. I'll be there, I said, kissing Blythe's cheek. She smelled different. Not perfume, she was wearing the same Chanel she'd worn for 20 years. Something underneath it. Something chemical and sharp, like the smell of film cleaner on skin. Love you, she said. But she was looking at her phone, not at me. I drove down into Hollywood, the setting sun turning the sky the color of overexposed film. The film sat in the passenger seat, innocuous cans that contained nothing more dangerous than silver halide crystals and dreams. But back in my vault, in row J, position 7, sat a different kind of dream, the kind that could get people killed if the wrong person started paying attention. Serafina's office was in a building on Vine that had been glamorous in 1947 and had been declining ever since. I parked in the loading zone, grabbed one of the cans The Man Who Knew Too Much, Hitchcock's original, and headed inside. The security guard knew me, waved me through without looking up from his phone. Serafina wasn't there, of course, but I hadn't come to see her. I'd come to use the old freight elevator that still had a working phone booth in the basement, one of those wooden jobs with a folding door and a coin slot that hadn't accepted coins since the Carter administration. But the phone still worked, and more importantly, it had never been upgraded to digital switching. I dialed another number from memory, let it ring twice, hung up, then dialed again. Yes? The voice was younger than Orion's, female, professionally neutral. I need a genealogy workup. Duncan Smith claims to be from Palm Springs, collector, nouveau riche. Also Flynn Johnson, insurance, probably licensed in California. Timeline? 48 hours. Understood. I hung up, headed back to the car. The Preservation Society dinner was at the Magic Castle, that bizarre Victorian mansion perched above Highland where magicians went to practice lying professionally. How appropriate. I arrived 15 minutes late, which in Los Angeles terms meant I was early. The valet took my keys with the bored efficiency of someone who'd parked 1,000 BMWs exactly like mine. Inside, the dining room was full of the usual suspects: film historians, restoration specialists, wealthy donors who thought owning a print of Casablanca made them cultural ambassadors. Blythe was at our table, laughing at something Flynn Johnson had said. He was mid-40s, the kind of aggressively handsome that suggested a gym membership was his primary personality trait. When he saw me, he stood, extended his hand with stockholder meeting enthusiasm. "Orson, your wife's been telling me about your collection. Fascinating stuff." "It's just a hobby," I said, taking my seat. "Some hobby. Blythe says you have nitrate prints. Do you know what those are worth?" "They're worth preserving," I said. "That's all that matters to me." Duncan Smith materialized beside our table like a jump cut, carrying 2 martinis. He handed one to Blythe with casual familiarity that made my jaw tighten. "Orson," he said, sitting without being invited. "I've been dying to talk to you about Soviet-era experimental films. I heard you have some remarkable examples." "Where did you hear that?" He smiled, the kind of smile that had been practiced in mirrors. "The collecting community is small. Word travels." "Funny," I said. "I've been collecting for 30 years and I've never heard of you." The smile flickered but held. "I've been focusing on European holdings until recently. Just relocated from Prague, actually." Prague. Of course. The city where intelligence services went to launder their histories, where new identities were sold like knockoff watches on the Charles Bridge. "What brought you to Palm Springs?" I asked. "The climate. Better for film preservation than Central Europe." It was a good answer. Too good. The kind of answer someone had rehearsed. The dinner proceeded with the usual speeches about the importance of preservation, the need for funding, the race against time to save deteriorating acetate. I nodded at the right moments, applauded when everyone else did, but my mind was elsewhere, running through possibilities. Someone had broken into my vault. Someone had taken a microdot that contained information that should have been worthless after 30 years. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for, and that someone was probably sitting at my table, eating my bread, laughing at my wife's jokes. After dinner, during the brief chaos of everyone saying goodbyes and exchanging cards, I slipped out onto the terrace. The city spread below like a circuit board, 10 million lights that could have been 10 million secrets. My phone buzzed, the real one this time, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Your requested item is ready for pickup. Code." Orion had found something. I deleted the text, went back inside. Blythe was still talking to Duncan and Flynn, the 3 of them huddled like conspirators over coffee. When she saw me, she waved me over. "Duncan was just telling us about a festival in Prague that wants to feature American propaganda films," she said. Isn't that fascinating? Fascinating, I agreed, watching Duncan's eyes for any tell, any indication that he knew what he'd really been looking for in my vault. But his face was perfect, unmarked by anything except pleasant interest. Which is how I knew, with the certainty that had kept me alive in places where certainty was the only currency that mattered, that I was looking at a professional. The question was, whose professional? And what did they want with a list of names that should have been buried with the Berlin Wall? We drove home in silence, Blythe checking her phone at every red light. The house was dark except for the landscape lights that turned our gardens into a film noir set. Inside, I could hear the hum of the climate control system in the vault, keeping my films at the perfect temperature, the perfect humidity, the perfect conditions for preserving the past. But someone had been in there. Someone had taken something that could reshape the present if it fell into the wrong hands. And I was beginning to suspect that the wrong hands might be wearing my wedding ring. I poured myself a Scotch Macallan 18, a gift from a grateful studio executive whose grandfather's home movies I'd saved from Vinegar Syndrome, and stood at the window overlooking the canyon. Somewhere out there, in a hotel room or a rented house or a safe house, someone was examining that microdot under a microscope, reading names that had been hidden for 3 decades. "Coming to bed?" Blythe called from the hallway. "In a minute." I heard her footsteps recede, the bedroom door close. Then I went down to the vault, to row J, position 7, and opened the can I'd been avoiding all evening. Berlin Transfer. A film that didn't exist, had never existed, would never exist in any catalog or database. But inside that can, hidden in the emulsion itself, was the other half of the list. The half that contained the names of the handlers, the puppet masters, the ones who'd been pulling strings from Moscow and Washington and places in between. The seal was intact. The edge codes were correct. No one had touched this one, which meant they didn't know it existed. Or they were waiting for me to lead them to it. Either way, I had a decision to make. I could run. I still had contacts, still had safe houses that were probably safe, still had skills that were probably sharp enough. Or I could stay and play the game, find out who was hunting through my collection and why they'd chosen now to surface. I looked at the can in my hands, at the name written on the label in my own careful handwriting 30 years ago. Then I made my choice. I would stay. I would wait. I would watch. And when they made their next move, I would be ready. Because that's what a timekeeper does. We preserve the past, protect the present, and sometimes, when necessary, we ensure that certain futures never come to pass. I sealed the can, returned it to its place, and went upstairs to sleep beside a woman who might be a stranger, in a house that might be compromised, living a life that might be nothing more than another perfect illusion. But every film has to end sometime. And when this one did, I intended to be the one writing the final scene. Chapter 2. I didn't confront Blythe that night, or the next morning, or even the following week. Instead, I did what I'd been trained to do 3 decades ago in a windowless room in Langley where they taught us that patience was the deadliest weapon in our arsenal. I watched. I listened. I laid traps so subtle that even I sometimes forgot where I'd placed them. The first trap was dust-magnetized iron filings so fine they were invisible to the naked eye, scattered on the vault door handle in a pattern I photographed with a macro lens. If anyone touched that handle, the pattern would change. The second was a strand of Blythe's own hair, taken from her brush, and placed across the seam of film can J7 at precisely 47 degrees. The third was a mechanical door sensor from 1962 that I'd bought at a surveillance equipment estate sale in Glendale, the kind that clicked once when triggered and never reset. No electronics, no signal, no way to detect it with modern equipment. Tuesday morning, Blythe left for her office in Century City at 7:30. Same as always. Kiss on the cheek, travel mug of Ethiopian coffee, the black Tesla Model S gliding silently down our drive like a hearse running in reverse. I waited 15 minutes, then went to work. The magnetic dust pattern was destroyed. Someone had definitely touched that handle. But here's what separated amateurs from professionals. They'd tried to recreate the pattern. There were swirls in the dust where someone had attempted to redistribute it evenly, not knowing it had been laid down in a specific design. They'd been careful, just not careful enough. The mechanical sensor had been triggered too. That almost made me smile. All their high-tech precautions, and they'd been undone by something that predated the Kennedy administration. But the hair on J7 was still in place, still at 47 degrees, which meant they hadn't found the second list yet. Or they were better than I thought, and had photographed the hair placement before opening it. But I doubted that. People who were that careful wouldn't have disturbed the magnetic dust. I sat in my workshop, a converted bedroom where I repaired old projectors and occasionally built things that weren't exactly projectors, and considered my options. The smart play was to call Orion, activate whatever dusty protocols might still exist for situations like this. But I'd been out for 15 years. Officially, I was nobody. A film enthusiast with a generous pension from a consulting firm that had never really existed. Besides, this felt personal. The microdot they'd taken contained 13 names, but one of those names was special, Alexei Volkov, a Russian cultural attaché who'd actually been running a network of sleeper agents across Southern California in the 80s. He'd been my asset, turned during a film festival in West Berlin where I'd convinced him that his handler in Moscow had burned him. Which was true, I'd just helped the burning along with some carefully placed disinformation. Volkov had been dead for 10 years, heart attack in a Miami retirement community where he'd been living as Alex Wolf, retired import-export specialist. But his children were alive, his networks might be alive, and someone clearly thought that information was worth the risk of breaking into my home. I heard tires on gravel too early for Blythe. I moved to the window, careful to stand behind the curtain. A van, the kind that could be delivering packages or conducting surveillance with equal ease. The driver stayed behind the wheel while a second man approached my door. Uniform, clipboard, the universal camouflage of the service industry. The doorbell rang. I let it ring again, then answered on the third attempt, affecting the mild irritation of someone interrupted from important nothing. Package for Davis? The delivery man was young, Latino, with the kind of forgettable face that could have been engineered in a laboratory for exactly this purpose. I didn't order anything. He checked his clipboard with theatrical concentration. Says here it's from... He squinted. TCM Classic Film Festival? Signature required. Serafina hadn't mentioned sending anything. I signed with my left hand, a scrawl that looked nothing like my actual signature. The package was light, rectangular, the size of a film can, but the wrong weight. I waited until the van was gone, then took the package to the workshop. Inside my modified projector case was a portable X-ray scanner I'd acquired through channels that preferred not to be named. The package showed clean, no wires, no obvious devices, just what looked like papers and a small rectangular object. I opened it carefully, using tools that would preserve any fingerprints. Inside was a screening schedule for the TCM festival and a USB drive. There was also a note in Serafina's handwriting. Thought you'd want to see this. Found it in our archive during digitization. Call me. S. The USB drive was a problem. Plugging unknown drives into computers was like playing Russian roulette with 5 bullets instead of 1. But I had a solution for that, an air-gapped laptop that had never touched the internet, running a Linux distribution that existed only in certain circles where paranoia was considered a lifestyle choice. The drive contained a single video file. Footage from the TCM Festival's security cameras from 3 weeks ago, the night I'd attended their screening of the Maltese Falcon. I remembered that night it was the same evening someone had first accessed my vault. I played the footage. There I was, entering the theater at 7:47 p.m. There was Blythe, arriving separately at 7:52, which was odd because she'd said she was showing houses in Malibu that night. But what made my blood run cold was the timestamp at 11:33 p.m. Duncan Smith and Blythe leaving together through a side exit while I was still inside watching the film. The workshop felt suddenly cold. I rewound, watched again. The body language was unmistakable, the casual familiarity of people who'd touched before, who had plans that didn't involve witnesses. My phone rang, the legitimate one. Orson? It was Serafina. Did you get my package? Just opened it. Where did this footage come from? My assistant was pulling security video for a documentary about the festival. She thought you'd want to see it. Orson. Is everything okay? Why do you ask? Because Duncan Smith was here yesterday asking about your collection, specifically asking about Soviet-era films. He said you were thinking of selling. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm not selling anything. That's what I told him, but he was insistent. Said he'd spoken to your wife about it. Of course he had. Serafina, I need a favor. If anyone else asks about my collection, could you let me know? Immediately? Of course. Orson, should I be worried? No, I lied. Just some estate planning complications. After I hung up, I called the number Orion had given me and arranged to meet at the Chinatown safe house. Then I went down to the vault and began what would look like routine maintenance, but was actually preparation for war. I pulled out 3 films: The Manchurian Candidate, 3 Days of the Condor, and The Conversation. Inside each can, hidden in the leaders, were things that weren't supposed to exist. The first contained a set of identity documents that were 15 years old but still valid: passport, driver's license, credit cards, all under a name that had a complete history in the appropriate databases. The second held cash, euros, dollars, yuan, enough to run for 6 months without touching a bank. The third contained a Glock 19 that had never been fired outside of a very specific range in Virginia that officially didn't exist. I was resealing the cans when I heard Blythe's Tesla in the drive 3 hours early. I moved quickly but calmly, replacing everything exactly as it had been. By the time she reached the vault door, I was examining a print of Sunset Boulevard with a jeweler's loop, the picture of domestic tranquility. "You're home early," I said without looking up. "Client canceled. Thought we could have lunch." She paused at the door, not entering. In 23 years, she'd been in the vault maybe a dozen times. It had always been my space, my sanctuary. "What are you working on?" "Checking for vinegar syndrome. Have to catch it early or it spreads to the whole collection." She made a sympathetic noise. "Sounds tedious." "Preservation always is." "Duncan called. He wants to know if you'd be interested in a private screening at his place in Palm Springs. He's built a proper theater, 70 mm capability and everything." I set down the loop, turned to face her. She was wearing a new dress, something I didn't recognize. Red, expensive, the kind of thing you wore when you wanted to be remembered. "Since when are you and Duncan so friendly?" "Since he became interested in buying that mansion in Trousdale. The commission alone would cover our taxes for 5 years. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Is that a problem?" "No problem. I just prefer to keep business and hobbies separate. Your hobbies are costing us a fortune in insurance and climate control. Maybe it's time to think about downsizing." There it was, the first open salvo. After years of tolerating my collection, suddenly she was concerned about costs. "The collection is staying," I said, my voice flat. "I'm not saying get rid of everything, just maybe the more valuable pieces, the ones that need special handling." She stepped into the vault, something she almost never did. "Like those nitrate films. They're dangerous, aren't they? I read they can spontaneously combust. Only if they're stored improperly." She was moving along the shelves now, her fingers trailing just above the cans, not quite touching. She stopped at row J. "What's in this section?" "Eastern European films. Nothing valuable." Her hand hovered over J7. My pulse stayed steady. 30 years of training doesn't just disappear. "Berlin transfer," she read from the label. "Sounds like a spy movie. Industrial film about railroad modernization. Incredibly boring." She laughed, moved on, but I'd seen her eyes flick to her phone when she touched the shelf, checking something. A photo? Instructions? I wouldn't know until I checked the magnetic dust patterns again. "Lunch?" she asked, heading back to the door. "I need to finish this row. Rain check?" Her smile tightened. "Sure, I'll be in my office." After she left, I examined row J. The dust patterns were compromised in a 3-foot radius around J7. She'd been more careful than whoever had been here before she'd disturbed less, but she'd still left traces. I pulled out my phone and texted Orion a single word: "Accelerate." His response came 30 seconds later. "Chinatown, 1 hour." I selected 5 films that actually were what they claimed to be, loaded them into a carrying case. If anyone asked, I was taking them for professional cleaning. Then I went upstairs, told Blythe I had to run errands, and left. The drive to Chinatown took 40 minutes in midday traffic. I parked 3 blocks from the actual location, walked a surveillance detection route that took another 20 minutes. By the time I reached the noodle shop with the unmarked door to the 3rd floor, I was certain I was clean. The safe house hadn't changed, same water-stained ceiling, same smell of old cigarettes and older secrets. Orion was waiting, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the 3 days since our last call. Beside him sat a woman I didn't recognize, 30s, Asian features, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. "This is Caspian Wilson," Orion said. "FBI Art Crime Team." I almost laughed. "The FBI has an art crime team?" "For the past 15 years, she said, her voice carrying a hint of Virginia tidewaters. "We've been tracking a ring that specializes in Cold War artifacts, documents, films, anything that might contain hidden intelligence. And you think my collection is connected?" She opened a tablet, showed me a map dotted with red pins. "Every one of these represents a theft from a private collection in the last 18 months. All collectors of Soviet-era materials, all robbed of specific items while more valuable pieces were left behind." "They're looking for something," I said. "Or someone," Orion added. "3 of the collectors were former intelligence like you. 2 are dead now. Heart attacks, supposedly." I thought of Volkov, dead of a heart attack in Miami. "Show him the Prague connection," Orion said. Caspian swiped to another screen. "Duncan Smith doesn't exist before 6 months ago, but facial recognition picked him up as Dmitry Sokolov, formerly of Czech intelligence, supposedly retired. He specializes in what they call legacy retrieval, finding old Soviet intelligence assets that were abandoned after the fall." "And my wife?" She hesitated, then swiped again. Security footage from an airport. "This is from LAX, 3 months ago. Your wife meeting Duncan's plane. 3 months. She'd been lying for 3 months. Maybe longer." "We think she was recruited through her real estate connections," Caspian continued. "Several of her recent sales have been to foreign nationals with questionable backgrounds. Cash purchases, no questions asked." The room felt too small suddenly. I walked to the window, looked down at the street where tourists were buying knockoff handbags and taking selfies, oblivious to the history being dissected 3 floors above them. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "We need to know what's in your collection that they want," Caspian said. "And we need you to help us catch them in the act." "You want me to be bait?" "We want you to be what you've always been," Orion said. "A guardian of secrets. Only this time we're going to let them think they're winning." I turned back to face them. "The second list. They don't know about it yet." "What second list?" Caspian leaned forward. "The microdot they took had 13 names, field agents, all low to mid-level. But there's another list hidden in a different film. The handlers, the ones who ran the networks. Some of those names are probably still active, maybe in government positions now." "Jesus," Caspian breathed. "That's what they're after. They think if they can identify the handlers, they can either blackmail them or eliminate them," I finished, "depending on whose side they're really on." Orion stood, paced to the wall where a water stain looked like a map of some country that didn't exist anymore. "We need to control this. Set up a handoff, make them think they're getting what they want. While documenting everything for prosecution," Caspian added. "And if they don't take the bait?" I asked. "Then we go with Plan B," Orion said. "Which is—" "We haven't figured that out yet." I laughed, genuinely this time. "Same old Orion, making it up as you go. It's worked so far." I thought about Blythe, about 23 years of marriage that might have been real once but was certainly a performance now. I thought about the vault beneath our house, filled with dreams and nightmares in equal measure. I thought about the names on that second list, people who'd lived quiet lives for 30 years, thinking they were safe. "Fine," I said. "But we do this my way, and when it's over, I want full immunity for anything that might come to light about my past operations." "Already arranged," Caspian said, producing a document from her briefcase. "Sign here." I read it carefully. "Old habits die hard," then signed my real name for the first time in 15 years. "So what's the plan?" Caspian asked. I smiled, the kind of smile I hadn't worn since Berlin when I'd convinced a KGB colonel that his own service had marked him for termination. We're going to give them exactly what they want, I said, just not in the way they expect. That evening, I returned home to find Blythe cooking dinner, something she only did when she wanted something or felt guilty about something. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and garlic, her mother's recipe for lamb that she'd made exactly twice in our entire marriage. "Smells good," I said, setting down the film cans with deliberate casualness. "I thought we should have a nice meal. We haven't really talked lately." She was wearing an apron over her dress, playing housewife like it was a role she'd just remembered existed. "What did you want to talk about?" She turned from the stove, wooden spoon in hand like a prop. "Us, our future, what we want to do with the next chapter of our lives." I poured myself wine from the bottle she'd opened, a Chateauneuf du Pape that cost more than most people's car payments. "I thought we were happy with this chapter." "Are we? You spend all your time with those films? I'm working longer hours than ever. When was the last time we took a vacation?" 3 months ago, Napa. That was a real estate conference. I worked the entire time. And met with Duncan Smith, apparently, but I didn't say that. "What are you proposing?" I asked. She turned back to the stove, stirring something that didn't need stirring. "Maybe it's time for a change? Sell this place, downsize, travel, enjoy life instead of just preserving it. The collection could be donated to a museum. You'd get a tax write-off, they'd get properly preserved films, everyone wins." "Including Duncan Smith?" She went very still. "What does Duncan have to do with anything?" "He seems very interested in my collection." "And you seem very interested in him." She turned, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes, not guilt exactly, but calculation. She was deciding which lie to tell. "He's a client, Orson. A wealthy client who could solve a lot of our financial problems if we play this right. We don't have financial problems. No, we have cash flow problems. There's a difference. Your collection is worth millions, but it just sits there, costing us money. Duncan is offering to buy select pieces at premium prices." "Which pieces?" "The Soviet films, mainly. He has a museum in Prague that specializes in Cold War artifacts. A museum that didn't exist, run by a man who didn't exist, to house films that contained secrets that weren't supposed to exist." It was almost elegant in its audacity. "I'll think about it," I said. Her face lit up genuine pleasure this time, or an excellent performance of it. "Really? Really? Have him send me a list of what he's interested in." She crossed the kitchen, kissed me. Her lips were warm, familiar, treacherous. "You won't regret this," she said. I was already regretting it. But that was the thing about marriage. Sometimes regret was just another word for love that had gone past its expiration date. We ate dinner like a normal couple, discussing normal things: the new restaurant in Silver Lake, the drought, the homeless camps spreading through Hollywood. She didn't mention Duncan again, and I didn't mention that I knew about their meetings. It was almost pleasant, this mutual deception, like a dance where both partners knew the other was planning to let go, but kept holding on for the sake of the music. After dinner, she went to her office for a conference call with Tokyo. I went to the vault to prepare for what came next. I pulled J7, opened it carefully. The film inside looked exactly like what it claimed to be, a boring industrial film about railroad modernization. But hidden in the emulsion, in a pattern that looked like dust or damage, was the second microdot. The one with the real names. The one that could reshape the post-Cold War order if the wrong people got their hands on it. I photographed it with equipment that had cost more than most people's houses, equipment that could read microdots without removing them. The names appeared on my screen like ghosts: American officials, Russian oligarchs, British intelligence officers, Chinese military attachés. Some were dead, some were very much alive and in positions of significant power. No wonder someone wanted this list. It was a roadmap to 30 years of hidden influence. I heard footsteps above Blythe heading to the bedroom. In a few minutes, she'd take her Ambien, put on her sleep mask, and be dead to the world for 8 hours. She'd been taking sleeping pills for 3 months now, right around the time Duncan Smith had entered our lives. Guilty conscience, perhaps, or just the stress of living a double life. I knew that stress. I'd lived it for years, pretending to be a film enthusiast when I was really an intelligence officer, pretending to be in love when I was really just using people for information. The only difference was that I'd been serving my country. Blythe was serving her bank account. Or maybe that wasn't fair. Maybe she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, helping to return stolen artifacts to their rightful owners. People could convince themselves of anything if the price was right. I sealed the can, returned it to its place. Tomorrow I would contact Duncan and begin negotiations. I would let him think he was winning. I would let Blythe think her plan was working. And then, when they'd revealed their entire network, when we knew every player and every plan, I would end this game the way I'd ended so many others, with handcuffs for some, coffins for others, and the truth buried so deep it would take another 30 years to surface. But tonight, I had one more task. I went to my workshop, to a filing cabinet that looked like it contained tax returns. Inside, beneath a false bottom, was a single photograph. Blythe and me on our wedding day, both of us young and genuinely happy, before the secrets and lies had accumulated like dust on old film. I looked at it for a long time, remembering the woman I'd married, wondering when exactly she'd become the woman upstairs. Then I fed it into the shredder and watched our past disappear into strips too small to ever reassemble. Some films were worth preserving. Others needed to be destroyed before they could destroy you. Tomorrow, the real performance would begin. Chapter 3. The law office of Atticus Moore occupied the top floor of a building on Wilshire that had been modern in 1987 and now looked like a monument to the last days of the Cold War, which was fitting, considering what I was about to discuss with him. But we didn't meet in his office. That would have been too obvious, too traceable. Instead, we met in a private screening room in the building's basement, a forgotten space that the building management rented out for corporate presentations that never happened anymore. Everyone used PowerPoint now, but this room still had a 16mm projector, a pull-down screen, and most importantly, no windows and only one door. Atticus was already there when I arrived, sitting in the dark like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. He was 73, rail-thin, with hands that shook slightly from early-stage Parkinson's, but eyes that missed nothing. He'd been CIA legal counsel before retiring into private practice, specializing in intellectual property cases that were never quite what they seemed. "Start the projector," he said by way of greeting. I threaded up the film I'd brought, The Parallax View, a movie about paranoia and assassination that felt appropriate. The sound of the projector would mask our conversation from any listening devices, and the flickering light would make lip-reading impossible. "Someone's trying to steal my collection," I said once the film was running. "Steal it or steal from it?" "Both. They've already taken one microdot. They're hunting for another." He leaned back in his chair, his shadow dancing on the wall behind him. "The Odessa files. You know about them?" "I know about lots of things that don't exist. It's why you're here." He pulled out a legal pad, began writing in the dark muscle memory from decades of taking notes in situations where light was a luxury. "Who are the players?" "My wife, for one." He didn't react, just kept writing. "Evidence?" "Video surveillance, suspicious financial activity, presence at the scene." "Circumstantial." "She was photographed entering my vault at 2 a.m. "Better. Who else?" "Duncan Smith, allegedly a collector from Palm Springs. Actually, Dmitry Sokolov. Check intelligence." "The FBI knows. They're running their own operation, but I need parallel tracks, legal protection, asset preservation." He stopped writing. "You're planning something they wouldn't approve of." It wasn't a question. "I'm planning to protect what's mine and eliminate threats to national security. The order of those priorities is negotiable. And you want me to make sure whatever you do stands up in court. I want you to make sure I don't go to prison for defending myself and my country." The film flickered on. Warren Beatty was being tested with images, programmed for something he didn't understand. Art, imitating life, imitating art. "Here's what we're going to do," Atticus said finally. "First, we establish clear ownership of your collection with updated documentation. Every single can, documented and registered. Second, we install a chain of custody protocol that will stand up in court. Every access, every movement, logged and witnessed. Third, we prepare cease and desist orders for anyone attempting to claim ownership of your materials. That's defense. I need offense. Fourth, he continued as if I hadn't spoken, we prepare a sting operation protocol that will be legally admissible. Hidden cameras in your vault. Already done. Marked bills if money changes hands. In progress. And most importantly, we need a clear record of criminal intent. They need to explicitly state what they're looking for and why. How do I get that? He smiled, his teeth catching the projector light. You offer them exactly what they want, but make them tell you why they want it. Record everything. And when they incriminate themselves, we have them. And if they're too smart for that, then we go to plan B, which is, we make them think they've already won, then pull the rug out at the last possible moment. Public exposure, media circus, the works. Intelligence agencies hate publicity more than they hate losing. I thought about it. It could work, but it would require precise timing and a level of acting I hadn't attempted since Berlin. I'll need backup documentation, I said. Provenance for the films that doesn't lead back to intelligence sources. Already being prepared. I've been creating a paper trail showing you acquired these films through legitimate estate sales and auctions. Completely fabricated, but it will pass any scrutiny. You've been busy. I've been expecting this call for 15 years. The moment you left the agency with that collection, I knew someone would eventually come for it. On screen, the conspiracy was revealing itself layer by layer. In the screening room, we were building our own conspiracy, one designed to catch other conspirators. There's something else, I said. The second microdot. It has names that could destabilize current governments. Then it can't surface. But I need to use it as bait. He was quiet for a long moment. Create a duplicate. Similar names, but slightly wrong. Like a map with false streets. If it gets out, we can trace it, and it won't do real damage. That would take specialized equipment. I know someone. Former NSA runs a document restoration business in Pasadena, completely legitimate front for very illegitimate capabilities. He wrote a name and address on his pad, tore off the sheet, handed it to me. The paper felt like it weighed more than the secrets it represented. What about Blythe? He asked. When this goes down, she'll be arrested. I know. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of what I thought was marriage. Apparently, the last few months have been something else. You could warn her. Give her a chance to come clean. She had that chance every morning when she woke up next to me and chose to keep lying. The film was ending. Warren Beatty was dead, and the conspiracy rolled on, just like real life. Next steps? I asked. Document everything. Every interaction, every conversation, every transaction. Build a case so airtight that no lawyer can punch holes in it. And Orson? He stood, his shadow looming large on the wall. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. Revenge and justice aren't the same thing. I know the difference. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a man who's about to burn down his entire life just to see who screams first. Maybe they need to scream. Maybe that's the only way this ends. He moved to the door, paused. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow. Asset protection, chain of custody, the works. But remember, once this starts, there's no stopping it. Legal proceedings have a momentum of their own. Like film through a projector. Exactly. And sometimes the film burns. After he left, I sat in the dark for a while, listening to the projector's empty spinning. Then I rewound the film, packed it up, and headed for Pasadena. The address Atticus had given me was for a strip mall that had seen better decades. Between a Korean BBQ place and a shop that sold healing crystals was a narrow storefront with a sign that read, Manuscript Recovery Services. The windows were tinted black. Inside, it looked exactly like what it claimed to be shelves of old books, a large scanner, bottles of various chemicals for treating aged paper. But I recognized the smell underneath the mustiness, the sharp tang of silver halide and fixer, the signature scent of a dark room. We're closed, a voice called from the back. Atticus Moore sent me. Footsteps. Then a man emerged from behind a curtain, 60s, white hair, wearing a lab coat that had seen actual labs. His eyes went immediately to the film can under my arm. Microdot, he asked. Modification and duplication. Follow me. The back room was a different world. Equipment that belonged in Langley or Fort Meade lined the walls. an electron microscope that cost more than most houses, a clean room with positive pressure. And in the corner, a device I recognized but had never seen outside of classified facilities, a microdot camera capable of reductions down to 0.01 mm. Show me what we're working with. I opened the can, extracted the relevant frame. He put it under the microscope, whistled low. Beautiful work. Soviet? Originally, I modified it in 89, added names. 13. I need to create a duplicate with similar but false names, close enough to pass initial inspection, different enough to be traceable if they surface. He studied the dot for a long moment. I can do it, but it'll take 48 hours, and it won't be cheap. How much? 50,000. I didn't blink. Done. You have it on you? I pulled out an envelope from my jacket, hundreds, non-sequential, withdrawn from various ATMs over the past week. He counted it with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. I'll need the original names and the substitutes. I handed him a list I'd prepared, names similar enough to be plausible but different enough to be useless. Where the real list had Anderson, the fake would have Andrews. Where it said Beijing, it would say Bangkok. Come back Thursday, same time. Bring another film to house it in something boring that no one would look at twice. I left him to his work and drove home through Pasadena's quiet streets, past craftsman houses that looked unchanged since the 1920s. Los Angeles was good at pretending the past was still present, at maintaining facades that hid modern decay, just like my marriage. Blythe was on the phone when I got home, pacing the living room with the energy of someone closing a deal. She held up a finger 1 minute and continued talking about escrow and inspection contingencies. Real estate speak, the language of legal deception. I went down to the vault, but not to check the films. This time I had installation work to do. Using skills I'd learned in a basement in Virginia 30 years ago, I began setting up the final pieces of my trap. First, the isotope markers. Radioactive tags so faint they were undetectable without specialized equipment, but unique as fingerprints. I painted them onto specific cans J7, of course, but also several others that might attract attention. If these films moved, I'd be able to track them from 1,000 yards away with the right scanner. Second, the RFID chips. Passive, unpowered, smaller than a grain of rice. I hid them inside the film leaders, places only someone actually viewing the film would find. Each chip had a unique signature that would show up on any modern security scanner, the kind every airport and federal building used. Third, the chemical markers, a compound developed by the CIA in the 70s, invisible to the naked eye but which fluoresced under specific wavelengths of UV light. I applied it to the film cans handles. Anyone who touched them would carry the residue for days, marking them as clearly as a scarlet letter. I was applying the last of the chemical markers when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Blythe never came down here, but tonight she did, her heels clicking on each step like a countdown. Working late? She asked from the doorway, not entering. Inventory, for insurance purposes. Good timing. Flynn Johnson wants to reassess our coverage. He says we're undervalued by at least 40%. Based on what? Market rates for rare films. Apparently nitrate prints are selling for astronomical prices now. I turned to look at her, really look at her. She'd changed clothes now, wearing jeans and a sweater, casual in a way that looked calculated. Her wedding ring caught the light, the diamond I'd bought with my first CIA bonus back when I thought I was going to save the world and have a normal life too. Is that what this is about? Money? What else would it be about? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. She stepped into the vault, just one step, testing boundaries. We're not getting younger, Orson. We should be thinking about our future, our retirement. I am retired. No, you're hiding. Down here with these films, living in the past. And you're living in the present? I'm trying to, but it's hard when your husband cares more about dead actors than living people. It was a good performance, making this about emotional neglect rather than international espionage. I almost admired it. What do you want me to do? I asked. Meet with Duncan. Hear his offer. That's all. Fine. Set it up. Her face transformed genuine surprise, followed by calculated pleasure. Really? Really? But here, not at his place. I want him to see exactly what he's trying to buy. He'll love that. He's been dying to see your vault properly. I bet he had. She left, practically floating up the stairs. I gave her 5 minutes, then followed. She was in her office, already on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the excitement. Back in my workshop, I opened my laptop, the secure one, and found an encrypted message from Caspian Wilson. Team in place. Ready when you are. I typed back. Thursday. They'll make their move Thursday. That gave me 48 hours to perfect the trap, to ensure every piece was in place. 48 hours to prepare for the end of my marriage and possibly the end of Duncan Smith's freedom. 48 hours to decide if I was really ready to destroy everything I'd built over the past 15 years. But I'd made that decision the moment I saw that tramline scratch on the film leader. Everything since then had just been preparation for the war that was always coming, the one between those who preserve the past and those who want to exploit it. Wednesday morning came gray and damp, marine layer thick enough to hide the Hollywood sign. I met Orion at a coffee shop in Los Feliz, one of those places that served $17 toast and attracted people who thought screenwriting was a personality. Duncan's real name isn't Dmitry Sokolov, he said without preamble. That's another alias. Who is he really? Viktor Chenkov, former GRU, specialized in cultural intelligence using art and media to run operations. That explains the film knowledge. He's good, Orson. 3 of our people in Europe, all retired, all dead within 6 months of him visiting their cities. Natural causes? Heart attacks, strokes, 1 car accident. Nothing provable, but the pattern is clear. And Blythe. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, a clear financial trail. She's been moving money for 6 months. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger reporting requirements. But it adds up to almost $500,000, all to offshore accounts. Payment or preparation? Both, probably. Payment for access, preparation for disappearing. I studied the statements. The amounts were clever, $9,999 here, $9,500 there, always just under the reporting thresholds. But the pattern was clear to anyone who knew how to look. She's planning to run, I said. The minute they get what they want. There's a property in Costa Rica purchased through a shell company last month. Nice place, ocean views, no extradition treaty. She always wanted to retire to the beach. Orson, when this goes down, it's going to be messy. Public. You sure you're ready for that? I've been ready since Berlin. He leaned back, studied me with eyes that had seen too much. You know, I always wondered why you kept those films, why you didn't destroy them when you left the agency. Because someone needed to remember. Someone needed to preserve the evidence of what we did, good and bad. And if that evidence destroys lives, then maybe those lives needed destroying. We sat in silence while around us people typed on laptops, writing stories that would never sell about people who would never exist. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was living a story that no one would believe, about people who weren't supposed to exist. Thursday, I said finally. Have your people ready? They already are. That evening, Duncan Smith came to dinner. He arrived in a Bentley, black and gleaming like a hearse for the living. He was dressed casually but expensively, the kind of casual that took effort and money to achieve. He brought wine, a Chateau Margaux that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Orson, he said, shaking my hand with exactly the right amount of pressure. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this. His English was perfect, almost too perfect, the kind that came from intensive training rather than natural acquisition. But he'd added just enough California inflection to seem authentic. If I hadn't known what to look for, I might have believed it. Blythe had prepared dinner salmon with that sauce she only made for special occasions, the one her mother had taught her before the Alzheimer's took everything away. She was playing the perfect hostess, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept checking her phone when she thought no one was looking. So, Duncan said over appetizers, Blythe tells me you have quite a collection. It's modest. Modest? Blythe laughed, but it sounded forced. He has over 3,000 films, including nitrate prints that museums would kill for. Not kill, I said mildly. Maybe maim a little. Duncan smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. I understand you have some Soviet-era materials. That's a particular interest of mine. Why Soviet films? My family is from Prague. We lived through the occupation. These films, they're historical documents, evidence of what was done to us. It was a good cover story, emotional without being overly sentimental, the kind of thing Americans would accept without questioning. I might have a few things, I said. I'd love to see them, if you're comfortable with that. I stood. Why not? Blythe, why don't you show Duncan the vault while I get dessert ready? She blinked, surprised. The vault was my domain. I never delegated its showing. Are you sure? Of course. You know the collection almost as well as I do. That was a lie, but she didn't correct me. They followed me down the stairs, Duncan's footsteps heavier than they should be for a man his size. He was carrying something, a weapon, probably, though he'd be foolish to use it here. The vault door opened with its usual whisper. I'd disabled the new security for tonight, made it look vulnerable. But every camera was running, every microphone hot, every trap armed. My God, Duncan breathed, and for a moment the mask slipped. I saw real desire in his eyes, not for the films, but for what they might contain. 3,000 films, I said, gesturing at the shelves. 30 years of collecting. He moved into the space like a predator entering a cave, careful but confident. His eyes went immediately to Section J, but he was smart enough not to head straight for it. Instead, he examined other sections first, asking intelligent questions about preservation techniques and storage temperatures. The nitrate films, he said finally. May I? I opened the segregated compartment. 14 cans, each one a potential bomb, but only one contained what he really wanted, and it wasn't even real. Berlin transfer, he read, his voice carefully neutral. What's that about? Industrial film about railroad modernization. East German, 1955. Incredibly boring, but historically significant. Why? It shows the early communist infrastructure projects, the ones that failed but were never officially acknowledged. I'd be very interested in that, for my museum. I didn't know you had a museum. He smiled. Being developed, in Prague, focusing on cultural artifacts of the Cold War. This would be a centerpiece. How much? For this one film? 50,000. Blythe made a small sound surprise or pleasure, I couldn't tell. That's generous, I said. I believe in paying fair prices for important historical documents. I'll think about it. Please do, but don't think too long. I'm leaving for Prague on Friday. Friday. So Thursday was definitely the day. We went back upstairs, had dessert, made small talk about the film industry and real estate prices. Duncan was good, he never pressed, never seemed too eager. But I could see him checking his watch, calculating something. After he left, Blythe was electric with excitement. 50,000 for one film. Orson, do you understand what this means? It means he wants it very badly. It means we could solve all our problems. Sell him a few films, invest the money. Our problems? I wasn't aware we had problems. She stopped, caught. You know what I mean. The maintenance costs, the insurance are manageable. But why just manage when we could thrive? I looked at her, this woman I'd loved, this stranger I'd married. Is that what this is about? Thriving? It's about being smart, taking opportunities when they present themselves. And Duncan is an opportunity? Yes. And you? What are you to him? The question hung between us like a film frame frozen in the gate, burning slowly under the lamp. I'm your wife, she said finally. Everything I do is for us. Another lie delivered with conviction. She was good, but I was better. I'll sell him the film, I said. Her face lit up. Really? Thursday. He can come by in the afternoon. We'll do the transfer. Everyone wins. She kissed me then, and for a moment it felt real, like we were actually the couple we pretended to be. But I could taste the deception on her lips, bitter as developer fluid. That night, she took her Ambien and fell asleep quickly. I lay beside her, watching the ceiling fan turn, thinking about Thursday. In 48 hours, this would all be over. The lies, the pretense, the careful dance we'd been doing. I got up, went to the window. Los Angeles spread out below, a circuit board of lights and possibilities. Somewhere out there, Caspian Wilson's team was preparing. Somewhere, Orion was running final checks. Somewhere, a forger in Pasadena was creating a false microdot that would serve as bait. Thursday would be the day the trap snapped shut, the day the timekeeper stopped keeping time and started taking it back. I went down to the vault one more time, to J7, to the film that had started everything. Inside was a list of names that could reshape the world, or at least certain corners of it. By Thursday night, those names would either be safe forever or in the hands of people who would use them for God knows what purpose. But that was the thing about film once it was exposed to light. You couldn't unexpose it. You could only develop it and see what images emerged. Thursday would be Development Day. Chapter 4. Thursday arrived wrapped in unusual weather-actual rain in Los Angeles, the kind that sent the city into a panic and washed all the accumulated grime down the storm drains and into the ocean. I watched it from the kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hand, as Blythe performed her morning ritual of checking her phone, applying makeup, and pretending everything was normal. "Duncan confirmed 3 o'clock, she said without looking up from her screen. "He'll bring a certified check. Tell him to make it cash." She looked up sharply. "Cash? For 50,000? If he wants the film today, it's cash. Otherwise, we wait for the check to clear, and that could take weeks." She typed quickly, waited. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. "He says fine. Cash it is." Of course it was. People running intelligence operations always had cash available. It was as essential as false passports and clean phones. "I need to run some errands," I said. "I'll be back by 2. "Where are you going?" "The lab in Pasadena." "I want to get the film cleaned before the transfer." Another lie, but wrapped in enough truth to be plausible. She nodded, already lost in her phone again, probably messaging Duncan about the change in plans. I drove to Pasadena through rain-slicked streets, the city looking different when wet, like a photograph developed with the wrong chemicals. The manuscript recovery shop was open, the owner waiting with a package wrapped in brown paper. "It's perfect," he said, handing it over. "Even I can't tell the difference without a microscope." Inside was a film can containing industrial progress in the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, quite possibly the most boring film ever made about East German railway development. But hidden in frame 447 was a microdot containing 13 names, all wrong, all traceable, all designed to lead nowhere except back to whoever tried to use them. "If someone runs these names," I asked, "they'll get initial hits. The algorithms will show possibilities, near matches. But when they dig deeper, they'll find nothing, and we'll know exactly who's looking." "How?" "Each name has a digital tripwire. The moment someone searches for that specific combination, we get an alert." I paid him another 20,000, the perfection wasn't cheap, and drove to the Chinatown safe house. Orion was there with Caspian Wilson and 3 other FBI agents I didn't recognize. They looked like accountants, which probably meant they were killers. "Walk us through it," Caspian said. I laid out the plan on a table that had seen better decades, using film cans as props. "Duncan arrives at 3. Blythe will let him in. She always answers the door when he comes. They'll go to the vault together. I'll already be down there, probably doing maintenance or some other excuse." "Armed?" "No, that would spook him. But I'll have the Glock positioned behind can F-15, easily accessible." "And the real film?" "Already removed. What he'll get is the fake, but he won't know that until it's too late." "What about your wife?" one of the unnamed agents asked. "Is she armed?" "Unlikely. Blythe doesn't like guns. Says they're uncivilized." "Unlike stealing state secrets," Orion muttered. I continued. "Duncan will want to inspect the film. I'll let him. He'll see what he expects to see: old footage of trains and factories. The microdot is invisible without specialized equipment. He'll make the payment, take the film, and leave." "That's it?" Caspian asked. "That's phase 1. Phase 2 happens tonight." I explained the rest. How the isotope markers would let us track the film. How Duncan would certainly move it tonight, probably to a diplomatic pouch or secure courier. how we'd intercepted in transit, catching him with what he thought was state secrets. "And Blythe?" Caspian asked. "We'll probably try to leave with him. She's been preparing for weeks, money moved, documents arranged. She thinks tonight is her escape." "You're very calm about your wife planning to abandon you." "I'm calm about a foreign agent who happened to marry me planning to complete her mission. The woman I married has been gone for months, maybe years." They reviewed the plan twice more, looking for holes. There weren't any. I'd been planning operations like this for decades. Muscle memory didn't fade just because you retired. "One more thing," I said. "The vault has 14 nitrate films. Real nitrate, not safety stock. If shooting starts, one stray bullet could turn the whole house into a crater." "We'll be careful," Caspian said. "No. If shooting starts, everyone runs. The films are replaceable. People aren't." "Sentimental for a spy," one of the agents said. "Practical for someone who's seen nitrate fires. They burn at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit and can't be extinguished with water. You run or you die." That sobered them appropriately. I drove home through lessening rain, Los Angeles returning to its normal state of drought denial. The house looked the same as always, mid-century modern, pretending nothing had changed since 1962. But I could feel the difference, like the pressure drop before a storm. Inside, Blythe was in her office, door closed, voice a low murmur through the wood. I went to the workshop, checked my equipment one more time. The cameras were recording, the microphones hot, the isotope detector fully charged. Everything ready for the performance. At 2:30, I went down to the vault and began my final preparations. I moved J7 to a more accessible position, making it easier for Duncan to find. I positioned the fake film where the real one had been, even adding a bit of dust to make it look undisturbed for decades. I placed the Glock behind F-15, safety off, round chambered. Then I waited. They arrived at 2:58. I heard the Bentley's distinctive engine die in the driveway. Voices upstairs, Blythe's laugh too bright, Duncan's responses too measured. Footsteps moving through the house, the particular rhythm of people trying to appear casual while focused on a goal. The vault door opened. I was examining a print of the third man with a loop, the picture of obsessive collecting. "Orson," Blythe said, "Duncan's here." I looked up, affecting mild surprise. "Is it 3 already? Time flies in the vault." Duncan entered first, carrying an aluminum briefcase that probably cost more than most cars. He set it down carefully, eyes already scanning the shelves. "Thank you for this opportunity," he said. "Business is business. You want to see the film?" "If you don't mind." I pulled J7, noting how his eyes tracked the movement. I opened the can with deliberate care, unspooling enough liter to show the title frames. He leaned in, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something Russian pretending to be French. "May I?" He gestured to the film. "Of course." He put on white cotton gloves from his pocket professional and handled the film with expertise that wasn't entirely feigned. He held a frame up to the light, studying it with an intensity that would have been comical if I didn't know what he was really looking for. "The quality is remarkable for its age," he said. "I've kept it in optimal conditions, temperature and humidity controlled to archival standards." "I can see that." He carefully rewound the film, placed it back in the can. 50,000 as agreed? As agreed. He opened the briefcase. Bundles of hundreds, bank-fresh, consecutive serial numbers, which meant they'd been withdrawn recently and officially. That was interesting. Usually, intelligence operations used old bills, non-sequential, untraceable. This money had a path that could be followed. I counted it, taking my time, noting how Blythe shifted impatiently, how Duncan's jaw tightened slightly with each bundle I verified. "It's all there," Duncan said. "I'm sure it is. But my father taught me to always count cash transactions." "Your father was a wise man." "He was a projectionist at Grauman's Chinese. He understood the value of illusion." Duncan smiled at that, not understanding the warning wrapped in nostalgia. The money was correct. I placed it in a deposit bag, sealed it, set it aside with deliberate casualness. "The film is yours," I said. Duncan picked up the can with barely concealed eagerness. "You've made the right decision. This film will be properly preserved and displayed." In your museum that doesn't exist? The words escaped before I could stop them. The room froze. I'm sorry. Duncan's voice was carefully neutral. Nothing. Private joke. There are so many promised museums that never materialize. He relaxed fractionally. Mine will. You have my word. The word of Viktor Chenkov, formerly of the GRU. I wondered what that was worth on the open market. We should go, Blythe said quickly. Let Orson get back to his work. But Duncan wasn't ready to leave. He was looking at the other films, particularly the nitrate section. These others, he said. Might they also be available? That depends on what happens with this one. Meaning? If it ends up in a museum, properly displayed, I might consider selling others. If it disappears into a private collection, this is our only transaction. Fair enough. He extended his hand. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. I shook it, noting the calluses in places that came from weapons training, not film collecting. They left together, Blythe not even bothering with a goodbye kiss. I listened to their footsteps recede, the Bentley start, the crunch of gravel as it pulled away. Then I called Caspian. Package delivered. The bird has flown. We're tracking. Stand by. I went upstairs, poured myself a scotch, and waited. The house felt different with $50,000 of blood money in the vault and a fake microdot heading toward whatever network Duncan served. The rain had stopped, but clouds still obscured the mountains, making Los Angeles feel smaller, more confined. An hour passed. Then 2. Blythe didn't come home. At 6, my phone rang. Orion. They're at a warehouse in Boyle Heights. Duncan, your wife, and 3 others we don't recognize. The isotope signal is strong. The film is definitely there. Are you moving in? Not yet. We want to see who else shows up. And Blythe? Appears to be participating willingly. She's helping them repackage the film into what looks like diplomatic pouches. So there it was. Confirmation of what I'd known but hadn't wanted to believe. My wife wasn't just complicit, she was operational. There's something else, Orion said. We ran the serial numbers on those bills. They trace back to a cultural foundation that's a known front for Russian intelligence. So Moscow is paying for old secrets, or new leverage. Those names on the list, even the fake ones, could be used to... He stopped mid-sentence. I heard shouting in the background, car doors slamming. What's happening? They're moving. Multiple vehicles. This is it. Don't lose them. We won't. The line went dead. I sat in my empty house, in my perfect life that was about to implode, and waited for word that it was over. But it wasn't over. Not yet. At 8 o'clock, someone knocked on my door. Not the doorbell, a knock, deliberate and measured. I checked the security camera. A man I didn't recognize, tall, Germanic features, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the shoulder holster. I grabbed the Glock from the vault, tucked it into my waistband, covered it with my shirt. Then I answered the door. Mr. Davis? My name is Ernst Muller. I represent certain interests that are concerned about today's transaction. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course not. May I come in? I promise. I'm not here to harm you. Quite the opposite. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He moved like a professional, checking sightlines, noting exits, never quite turning his back to me. Beautiful home, he said. Very James Bond. Or perhaps more John le Carré, the ambiguity suits you. What do you want? The same thing you want, I imagine, to prevent certain information from reaching Moscow. Moscow? He smiled. Please, Mr. Davis. Or should I say, Mr. Timekeeper? We know about your collection, we know about the lists, and we know that what you sold today wasn't genuine. Who's we? Let's say I represent a European interest that would prefer certain Cold War secrets remain buried. The names on those lists include several people who are now quite powerful in the European Union. Their exposure would be inconvenient. So you're here to threaten me? Quite the opposite. I'm here to help you. You see, Viktor Chenkov, you know him as Duncan Smith, isn't working for Moscow. He's freelancing, selling to the highest bidder, and right now that bidder is someone who would use those names to destabilize Western democracy. Who? Does it matter? The point is, he needs to be stopped, and you're the only one who knows where the real list is. I studied him. this unexpected player in an already complex game. Assuming any of this is true, what are you proposing? A partnership. You help us recover both lists, the one Chenkov stole and the one still in your possession, and we ensure they're destroyed, properly, permanently, with no copies retained. And if I refuse? Then you're on your own against Chenkov, who will certainly return when he discovers the forgery, and he won't be as polite next time. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Caspian. We lost them, she said without preamble. How? Professional counter-surveil. They must have made us, scattered in 6 directions. We're tracking the isotope, but the signal split. They must have divided the film. Where's Blythe? Unknown. Her phone's off, credit cards haven't been used. She's gone dark. I looked at Mueller, who was studying my bookshelf with apparent fascination. I'll call you back, I told Caspian. I hung up, turned to my uninvited guest. They got away. For now. But Chenkov will discover the forgery within hours. He has resources, equipment. When he does, he'll come back. Let him come. Brave words. But your wife knows the house, knows your routines, and Chenkov has no compunction about violence. Ask the 3 retired officers he's already killed. So what do you suggest? Give us the real list. We'll use it as bait, draw him out, end this properly. And trust you to destroy it afterward? You don't have to trust me. Come with us. Watch it burn yourself. I thought about it. The smart play was to refuse, stick with the FBI, follow official channels. But official channels had just failed, and I had an enemy who knew where I lived, what I valued, and how to hurt me. I need an hour, I said. We don't have an hour. Then I guess you don't have a deal. He considered this, then nodded. 1 hour. I'll wait outside. After he left, I called Orion on the secure phone. There's a German intelligence officer in my driveway, I said. I know. We've been watching him watch you for 2 days. Why didn't you tell me? Because we wanted to see if he'd make contact. Mueller is BND, German Foreign Intelligence. He's been tracking Chenkov across Europe. Can we trust him? Can we trust anyone? But his interests align with ours for now. What about Caspian's operation? Blown. Chenkov was ready for us. But here's the interesting part: he left the isotope-marked film in the warehouse. He knows it's fake, or he's leaving it as bait for us. Either way, he'll be coming back for the real one. Then we need to be ready. Agreed. What's your play? I looked around my perfect house, my perfect life that was already destroyed. We give him what he wants, but on our terms. Meaning, TCM Festival, tomorrow night. Public place, hundreds of witnesses, cameras everywhere. We make the exchange there, but we control every variable. He'll never agree to that. He will if Blythe asks him to. There was silence on the line. Then, you think she'll contact you? I know she will. She left her mother's ring in the bathroom, the one she never takes off. It's a message she's not done here. Or it's bait. Everything's bait now. The only question is who's fishing and who's biting. I hung up, went to the vault one more time. The real J7 was hidden behind a false panel I'd installed years ago, along with other things that weren't supposed to exist. I pulled it out, held it up to the light. Such a small thing to cause so much trouble. A few feet of celluloid containing names that could topple governments. The phone rang. Not my cell, the landline, the one nobody used anymore except telemarketers and Blythe's mother when she remembered who we were. I answered on the 3rd ring. Orson. Blythe's voice, tight with something that might have been fear or excitement. Where are you? That doesn't matter. Listen, Duncan knows. About the fake. He's upset. How upset? He wants to make another deal, the real film for my safety. Your safety? I thought you were partners. A pause. It's complicated. It always is with you. Don't be bitter, Orson. Not now. Will you deal? TCM Festival. Tomorrow night, the opening gala, public place, lots of security. He won't like that. Those are my terms. He can take them or leave them. And Blythe? If anything happens to me, the FBI gets everything. The real list, the backups, the whole story. Nothing's going to happen to you. Despite what you think, I do care about you. You have a funny way of showing it. I was protecting you. The less you knew, the safer you were. From who? Who are you really working for? But the line was already dead. I went outside. Mueller was leaning against his car, smoking a cigarette with European elegance. "Change of plans," I said. "Tomorrow night, TCM Festival. That's where it ends." He dropped the cigarette, crushed it carefully. "I'll need details." "You'll get them. But first, I need something from you." "What?" "Proof that Ernst Mueller is who he claims to be." He smiled, pulled out a phone, dialed a number from memory. After a moment, he handed it to me. "Orion Taylor," the voice said. "Yes, Mueller is legitimate. Yes, you can trust him as far as you can trust anyone in this business. And yes, tomorrow night works for us." "How did you—" "We're all professionals here, Orson, even the ones pretending to be retired." I handed the phone back to Mueller. "Tomorrow night, then. Tomorrow night." He drove off, leaving me alone in my driveway. The lights of Los Angeles spread out below like a circuit board of promises and lies. Tomorrow night, at the TCM Festival, surrounded by people celebrating the preservation of cinema, I would trade away a different kind of preserved history. And maybe, if I was very lucky or very good, I'd survive to see Saturday. I went inside, locked every door, checked every window. Then I sat in my projection room with the Glock in my lap and the third man on the screen, watching Harry Lime disappear into the sewers of Vienna while I waited for dawn and the ending of my own noir story. The zither music played as Los Angeles slept, unaware that the Cold War was about to have its final frame. Chapter 5. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made Los Angeles look like a movie set too perfect to be real, too bright to hide secrets. But I knew better. I'd spent 30 years learning that the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. The TCM Festival was 12 hours away. In my workshop, surrounded by the tools of two trades, film preservation and intelligence work, I sat staring at a photograph from 1989. Berlin, 3 weeks before the wall came down. 4 men standing in front of a cinema that was showing a Soviet propaganda film. I was one of them. The other 3 were dead now too, naturally. One not so much. We'd called it Operation Odessa, though it had nothing to do with that Ukrainian city. The name came from the 1974 film A Joke About Filing Away Nazis that we'd repurposed for filing away Soviet sleeper agents. 30 years ago, it had seemed clever. Now it just seemed like another reminder that everything in intelligence was borrowed from fiction, including the belief that secrets could stay buried. The phone rang, the secure one. Orion. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Besides the obvious ones. The Germans pulled Mueller back to Berlin last night. Diplomatic emergency, supposedly. But my sources say he was recalled because someone higher up doesn't want him involved in tonight's operation. Someone knows. Someone always knows. The question is whether they're trying to protect the operation or sabotage it." I picked up the photograph again, studied those young faces full of certainty that we were doing the right thing. "Tell me about the Odessa lists. The real story, not the sanitized version." Orion was quiet for a moment. I could hear him lighting a cigarette he'd quit 20 years ago, but kept a pack for moments like this. "Spring of '89, he began. "The Soviet Union was collapsing, but nobody knew how fast or how completely. We had intelligence that the KGB was activating sleeper cells across the West, a last-ditch insurance policy in case everything went sideways. Your job was to identify and document these cells." "Which I did." "Which you did. 13 active cells in California alone, each with 2 to 5 operatives. But here's what you didn't know, what we didn't tell you. There was a parallel operation. While you were documenting the foot soldiers, another team was identifying their handlers, the puppet masters." My chest tightened. "Who ran the parallel operation?" "That's classified beyond even my level, but I can tell you this, some of those handlers weren't Soviet. They were American. Double agents who'd been playing both sides since the '60s. The photograph slipped from my fingers. "Jesus." "Yeah. So when you created that microdot with the field agents' names, someone else created a matching dot with the handlers' identities. The plan was to use both lists after the Cold War ended, to clean house quietly. But the wall came down too fast. Everything came down too fast. The lists got separated, filed away, forgotten. Until now." I stood, paced to the window. Below, a neighbor was washing his Tesla, the water beating on its surface like mercury. Normal Friday morning activities in an abnormal world. Duncan Victor, he's not just after the field agents' names, I said. No, he knows about the second list, the one in your Berlin transfer can. How? Because one of the handlers on that list is still active, and very interested in making sure their name never surfaces. Who? If I knew that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I thought about Blythe, about 23 years of marriage that might have been orchestrated from the beginning. My wife. Was she? We don't think so. Her recruitment appears to be recent, opportunistic. She got greedy, not strategic. Small comfort, but I'd take it. There's something else, Orion continued. Ren Lopez, the lab tech who warned you about the tampered leader? What about her? She's disappeared. Her apartment's been tossed, professional job. They were looking for something. Or someone. We have people looking for her. In the meantime, you need to prepare for tonight. Duncan's going to be desperate now that he knows the first list was fake. He'll come heavy. Let him. I've got the real bait. You sure you want to use it? I picked up the photograph again, looked at my younger self. That man had believed in clear lines between good and evil, us and them. 30 years later, I'd learned those lines were drawn in water. The only way to end this is to let them think they've won, I said, then pull the trap shut when they're all in the open. And if the trap doesn't close, then we'll all be in the open. After Orion hung up, I went to the vault. The real Berlin transfer can was in my hands now, weighing no more than any other film but carrying the weight of dozens of lives. I opened it carefully, examined the film stock. Somewhere in these frames, encoded in the emulsion itself, were names that could reshape the intelligence community's understanding of the Cold War's end. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She's safe, bringing her to you. A friend of WL, Ren Lopez. Someone had found her. 20 minutes later, a car pulled into my driveway, a beat-up Honda that looked like it had driven through a dust storm. Ren got out, looking haggard but intact. Behind her was someone I didn't expect, Apollo Jackson, the projection engineer from the theater. Mr. Davis, Apollo said, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by something harder. We need to talk. They followed me inside. Ren collapsed onto the couch like she'd been running for days. Apollo remained standing, watchful. You're not really a projectionist, I said to Apollo. I am. Just not only that. NSA, Technical Surveillance Division. We've been monitoring communications around the festival for 3 months. Why? Because someone's been using the festival's equipment to transmit coded messages. Old-school stuff modulated light signals during screenings that most people would think were just projection flicker. I looked at Ren. You knew? I suspected, she said, voice raw. When I was cleaning that film segment for Duncan, I noticed anomalies in the frame rate markings. They weren't random, they were code. What kind of code? Apollo pulled out a tablet, showed me a pattern analysis. Book cipher, keyed to specific films being shown. Someone sits in the audience, watches the flicker pattern, decodes it against dialogue from the film. Untraceable, unrecordable, perfect for passing intelligence. And tonight's screening is supposed to be the biggest transmission yet. We intercepted partial communication suggesting a major exchange of information. The pieces were falling into place. The TCM festival wasn't just where we'd planned our trap, it was where Duncan's network had been operating all along. How many people are we talking about? I asked. Based on signal analysis? At least 6 operatives in Los Angeles, probably more nationally. They've been using classic film screenings as cover for 3 years. Ren sat up straighter. There's more. When I was processing Duncan's film, I made a copy of the data before I cleaned it. I thought it was just reference material, but she pulled a flash drive from her pocket. It's a partial list, not names, but operational codes, dates, locations, film titles. Apollo took the drive, plugged it into his tablet. His eyes widened. Jesus. This goes back to 1991. They've been using film festivals as communication hubs since the Soviet Union collapsed. I thought about all the screenings I'd attended, all the festivals where I'd shown my prints. How many times had I been surrounded by operatives without knowing it? We need to tell Caspian, I said. Already done, Apollo replied. "She's adjusting the operation. But Mr. Davis, this changes things. We're not just catching Duncan anymore. We're potentially exposing a 30-year network." "Good." Both of them looked at me. I said good. These people have been hiding in plain sight, using something I love, something pure, as cover for their games. They've turned film preservation into espionage theater. That ends tonight. My phone rang. Blythe. "Don't answer," Apollo said. "I have to. She needs to believe everything's still on track." I picked up. "Orson?" Her voice was different, strained, frightened maybe. "Duncan wants to change the plan." "No changes?" "He says the theater's too public. He wants to meet at the warehouse in Boyle Heights, just you and him." "Then he doesn't get the film." A pause. I could hear voices in the background, muffled argument. "He says he'll hurt me if you don't come." "Are you asking me to save you, Blythe? After everything?" "I'm asking you to be the man I married, the one who always did the right thing." The irony was sharp enough to cut. "The man you married was a spy who lied to you for the first 10 years of our relationship. Is that the man you want?" "That's the man I need." I looked at Apollo and Wren. Apollo was shaking his head. Wren looked terrified. "TCM festival or nowhere," I said. "Those are the terms. And Blythe, if anything happens to you, it won't be because I didn't show up. It'll be because you chose the wrong side." I hung up. "Cold," Wren said quietly. "Necessary," I replied. "Duncan needs the film more than he needs leverage." "He'll show." Apollo's tablet chimed. He read the screen, frowned. "We have a problem. Festival security just reported a fire alarm in the projection booth. Someone's trying to clear the building." "When?" 5 minutes ago. "It's starting early. They're not waiting for tonight." I grabbed the Berlin transfer can, along with 2 others for camouflage. "We need to get there now." "It could be a trap," Apollo warned. "Everything's a trap. The only question is who springs it first." We loaded into Apollo's Honda. My BMW would be too conspicuous. As we drove through Hollywood traffic, I thought about the layers of deception we were about to navigate. Duncan thought he was getting the real list. The FBI thought they were catching a spy ring. The NSA thought they were shutting down a communication network. But someone else was playing a deeper game. Someone who'd been using all of us, Duncan, Blythe, maybe even me, as pieces on a board we couldn't fully see. "Mr. Davis," Wren said from the back seat, "there's something else about that film processing, something I didn't tell anyone." I met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "What?" "There was a second microdot, not in the same frame, but 3 frames later. I only noticed because I was being so careful with the cleaning." My blood went cold. "Did you read it?" "I tried, but it wasn't names. It was a single word, timekeeper." The car suddenly felt too small. Someone knew my operational designation from Berlin. Someone had been sending me a message. "Pull over," I told Apollo. "We're 3 blocks from the theater." "Pull over now." He yanked the wheel, stopped in a loading zone. I got out, stood on the sidewalk, tried to think through the implications. Someone had marked me 30 years ago. Someone had been waiting for this moment. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, timekeeper." The voice was electronically distorted, but somehow familiar. "It's been a long time." "Who is this?" "Someone who was there in Berlin. Someone who helped you create those lists. Someone who's been waiting 30 years for you to finally understand." "Understand what?" "That you were never preserving the past. You were preserving the future. My future. And tonight, that future arrives." The line went dead. Apollo and Wren had gotten out of the car, were watching me with concern. "We abort," Apollo said. "This is bigger than—" "No," I interrupted. "We go forward, but we go in knowing we're not the hunters anymore. We're the hunted." The Hollywood sign loomed above us, those white letters that had watched over so many dreams and nightmares. In a few hours, at the TCM festival, we'd find out which one this was. I looked at the film can in my hands, at the label I'd written 30 years ago. Berlin Transfer. Such an innocuous title for something that could burn down so many lives. "Let's go," I said. "Time to find out who's really been running this projection." We got back in the car, drove the final blocks to the theater. The building looked normal. No fire trucks, no evacuation. The alarm had been false, or called off, or never real to begin with. But something had changed. I could feel it in the air, that electric tension that comes before a storm or a shooting. Somewhere in that theater, someone was waiting for me. Someone who'd been waiting since Berlin. The timekeeper was about to discover what time it really was. Chapter 6. The TCL Chinese Theater rose from Hollywood Boulevard like a fever dream of Oriental excess, its facade a monument to Hollywood's golden age when cultural appropriation was called showmanship, and nobody thought twice about it. The forecourt was already filling with festival attendees, their feet carefully navigating between handprints of the dead and famous. I stood across the street with Apollo and Ren, watching the crowd through the lens of paranoia that 30 years in intelligence had ground into my corneas. "How many?" I asked Apollo. He was scanning faces with an app on his phone that I wasn't supposed to know existed. "3 confirmed operatives so far. 2 more possibles." "Duncan?" "Not yet, but Flynn Johnson just went in through the side entrance." Flynn, the insurance assessor who'd appeared so conveniently in our lives. Another piece on the board, though I still wasn't sure whose side he was playing for. "Mr. Davis," Ren said quietly, "I need to tell you something else about the second microdot." "Now?" "Before we go in. The word timekeeper. It wasn't alone. There were numbers, coordinates." "To what?" "Here, this theater, this exact location." I turned to look at her, this young woman who'd been pulled into something that started before she was born. Someone planned this 30 years ago? Or someone added it later, knowing you'd end up here? Apollo's phone buzzed. "Caspian's in position. She's got teams at all exits. FBI's official position is this is an art theft sting. Nobody knows about the intelligence angle except her core team." "Good. Keep it that way." I checked my watch, 5:47 p.m. The gala started at 7, the screening at 8. "I need to inspect the projection booth." "That's my job," Apollo said. "You're too visible. If Duncan has people watching, then they need to see me doing exactly what I'd normally do. I'm a projectionist, remember? Nobody thinks twice about me checking equipment." We crossed the street, entered through the lobby. The restored interior was magnificent in that particularly Hollywood way authentic artifice, genuine fakeness. Red columns, golden dragons, a ceiling that suggested China by way of MGM's imagination. Serafina Garcia stood near the concession stand, clipboard in hand, radiating the controlled panic of someone organizing chaos. When she saw me, her face went through several expressions before settling on professional concern. "Orson, I wasn't sure you'd come after. Everything. The show must go on. About that, we have a problem with the projection system. The xenon lamp in projector 2 died this morning." "Sabotage?" She blinked. What? No, just age. These bulbs have a lifespan. Where's the replacement? That's the problem. Our usual supplier is out. The backup supplier wants $3,000 for emergency delivery. $3,000 for a bulb that should cost $800. Someone was playing games with the supply chain. "I have one," I said. "In my car. Give me 20 minutes. I didn't, of course, but I needed an excuse to leave and return with equipment. Ren stepped forward. "I'll help. Those bulbs are fragile." We left Apollo to coordinate with Caspian and headed back to his Honda. In the trunk, wrapped in a moving blanket, was something better than a xenon bulb, a modified film containing a small projector of its own, one that could overlay images onto the main projection. NSA Technical Division's contribution to our operation. "You know how to install this?" Ren asked. "I helped design it. 1987 East Berlin. We used it to insert subliminal messages into Soviet propaganda films." "Did it work?" 3 KGB officers defected after watching a screening of Battleship Potemkin. "You tell me." We carried the equipment back through the side entrance, up the narrow stairs to the projection booth. The space was smaller than civilians imagined, cramped with 2 massive projectors, platters holding thousands of feet of film, and control panels that looked like they belonged on a submarine. The booth was supposed to be empty, but someone was already there. A man in his 60s, gray beard, wearing the black vest of senior projection staff. He turned when we entered, and I recognized him immediately, though I hadn't seen him in 30 years. "Hello, Orson." he said in accented English that had lost most of its Russian origins. You look well for a dead man. Alexei Volkov, the asset I'd turned in Berlin, the man whose death in Miami I'd read about 10 years ago. Alexei. I set down the equipment carefully, kept my hands visible. The heart attack was theater? Everything is theater. You taught me that. He gestured at the projection booth. 30 years I've been working festivals, showing films, passing messages, a ghost in the machine. You're the one running the light signal network. Running? No. I'm just a projectionist. I show what I'm given to show. He moved to the window overlooking the auditorium. Do you know why I chose this particular theater for tonight? Enlighten me. Because this is where The Wizard of Oz premiered in 1939. The ultimate story about illusion and reality, about the man behind the curtain. Tonight we pull back that curtain. Who's we, Alexei? He smiled, the same sad smile he'd worn in Berlin when he'd agreed to betray his country. The ones who understood that the Cold War never ended. It just changed projection formats. Ren had been silent, but now she spoke up. You're the one who added the second microdot, the coordinates. Alexei looked at her with grandfather's eyes. Smart girl. Yes, I added it. 5 years ago, when I heard Orson had retired to Los Angeles with his collection. I knew eventually someone would come for the lists. So I prepared the stage. For what? I asked. For the final screening. Tonight everyone shows their true faces. Duncan and his mercenaries, the FBI and their righteous authority, the handlers who've been hiding for 30 years, and you, Orson, the timekeeper who's been preserving more than just film. I don't understand. No? Then let me illuminate. He pulled out an old film can, opened it to reveal a 35mm print. This is the third man, but spliced into reel 3 is something special. Footage from Berlin, November 1989. Footage of you and 3 other men planning Operation Odessa. My throat went dry. That's impossible. We weren't filmed. Weren't you? The camera was in a briefcase recording everything. One of those 3 men was documenting the operation for posterity. Can you guess which one? I thought back to that room, that meeting. Orion had been there. Jenkins from State, and Morrison from CIA Counterintelligence. Morrison, who died in a car accident in 1995. Morrison was recording? Morrison was KGB, had been since Vietnam. Alexei threaded the film into the projector with practiced ease. He documented everything, including your real names, your operational plans, your safe houses. It's all here, preserved on film. Why are you telling me this? Because he checked his watch, 2 hours and 13 minutes, this film will be shown to a very select audience. Duncan will be there, thinking he's buying the handler list. The FBI will be there, thinking they're catching spies. But what they'll actually see is the truth about Operation Odessa, how both sides collaborated to create false lists of agents who never existed. The room spun slightly. The lists are fake? Oh, the people are real, but they were never agents. They were immigrants, dissidents, regular people whose names were put on lists to justify budgets, to create phantom threats, to keep the intelligence machinery running after its purpose ended. That's not true. I vetted those names. You vetted what you were given to vet. You documented what you were told to document. You were the perfect officer, Orson. Methodical, thorough, unquestioning. The ideal person to create authentic-looking documentation for a fabricated operation. I wanted to deny it, but pieces were clicking into place. The convenience of finding all those cells, the ease with which the names had been gathered, the way the operation had been shut down so quickly after the wall fell. So what's real? I asked. The handlers list. That one's real. That's why everyone wants it. Because those names represent people who've been manipulating both sides for 50 years. People who are now CEOs, senators, judges. People who would do anything to keep their secret. And you're going to expose them? No, you are. Why would I do that? Because it's the only way to save your wife. I laughed, bitter and short. Blythe made her choice. Did she? Or was she manipulated into it by professionals who've been doing this since before she was born? He pulled out a photograph, handed it to me. It was Blythe, but younger, maybe early 20s. Standing next to her was a man I recognized, Morrison, the dead CIA officer who'd apparently been KGB. This was taken in 1994. Alexei said. "A year before Morrison died. Blythe was his asset, Orson. Has been since before you met her. Your entire marriage was operational coverage." The photograph fluttered from my numb fingers. 23 years. All of it a lie. "She didn't know," Alexei continued. "Morrison told her she was helping American intelligence, that you were a dangerous double agent who needed to be watched. She thought she was being patriotic." "And Duncan?" "Convinced her that you were selling secrets to the Russians, that securing the lists was a matter of national security. She's not a traitor, Orson. She's a victim." Wren spoke up. "How do you know all this?" Alexei smiled. "Because I've been watching over Orson for 30 years, first for Moscow, then for myself, and finally for something bigger than nations." "Which is?" "The truth, or at least a version of it that might set some people free." Apollo's voice crackled through the earpiece I was wearing. "Davis, we have movement. Duncan just entered through the loading dock. 6 men with him." "Armed?" "Almost certainly." I looked at Alexei. "You've been planning this for years. Decades. Ever since I realized that the war we thought we were fighting never existed, that we were all puppets in someone else's show." "Whose show?" "That's what we find out tonight." He gestured to the projection booth's window. Below, the auditorium was starting to fill. "Everyone's taking their positions. Duncan in the orchestra section, FBI in the balcony. Your wife is backstage with Flynn Johnson, who's actually Treasury Department, investigating money laundering through art sales. Jesus, is anyone who they claim to be? You are, the timekeeper, the preserver of truth, which is why you're the only one who can end this." I picked up the modified projector equipment Apollo and I had brought. "This overlays false images onto the main projection." "I know. I helped design the original in Moscow, 1986. We used it to insert capitalist propaganda into our own films. The irony was delicious." "You want me to use it tonight?" "I want you to choose. Show the real film with the Berlin footage and expose everyone, including yourself. Or use your device to show something else to maintain the illusion a little longer. But choose consciously, not from habit or fear." "And if I choose to burn it all down? Then we burn together. But at least we burn free." Serafina's voice echoed up the stairs. "Projection check in 15 minutes. Alexei began the final preparations on the primary projector. I watched his hands, steady and sure despite his age, threading film through gates and rollers with the unconscious grace of decades of practice. "One more thing," he said. "Morrison didn't die in a car accident. He was eliminated by his own handler when he threatened to go public about the false lists." "Who was his handler?" "Someone in this building tonight, someone who's been watching you your entire career, someone who believes the lists are real and will kill to get them." "Give me a name." "I don't have one. But they have a tell they always wear a Patek Philippe watch, vintage 1962. Morrison mentioned it in his final transmission. A Patek Philippe from 1962. I knew someone with that exact watch, someone I'd trusted for 30 years. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. "Alexei, get out of here, when this goes bad. I'm staying. This is my theater now, my stage. I've been preparing for this finale since the wall came down." I heard footsteps on the stairs, multiple people moving with purpose. "They're coming," Wren whispered. The door opened. Duncan entered first, gun drawn but held low. Behind him, 2 men I didn't recognize, and behind them, Blythe, looking terrified and exhausted. "Gentlemen," Duncan said in his false American accent, "and ladies, I believe we have business to discuss." "The screening doesn't start for 2 hours, I said. "No, but our screening starts now." He gestured with the gun. "The film, Orson. The real one." I looked at the can in my hands, then at Alexei, who was smiling like he knew the punchline to a joke nobody else had heard yet. "Which one is real?" I asked. At this point, I honestly don't know. Duncan's composure cracked slightly. "Don't play games, the handler list, the second microdot." "Is that what you think you're buying? A list of names from 30 years ago?" "I know what I'm buying." "Do you? Or are you just another projectionist, showing what you're given to show?" Before Duncan could respond, the lights in the booth flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely. In the darkness, I heard Alexei laughing. "Showtime," he said, and somewhere in the building, an alarm began to sound. Chapter 7. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the projection booth in hellish red. Through that crimson filter, I saw Duncan's mask of control finally slip. His gun swung between Alexei and me, uncertain which old man posed the greater threat. "Nobody moves," he barked, accent wavering between American and something Eastern European. But Alexei did move, slowly and deliberately, reaching for the projection controls. "Do you know what film is, Mr. Smith? Or should I say Victor? Or is it something else today?" Step away from the projector. Film is light and shadow, nothing more. But between those frames, in the darkness the eye can't see, that's where the truth lives. Alexei flipped a switch. The main projector hummed to life, its beam cutting through the emergency lighting to paint images on the booth's back wall. 24 truths per second, interrupted by 24 lies. The images were grainy, handheld. Berlin, 1989. 4 men around a table. One of them was me, younger, hungrier, still believing in clear sides and clean victories. Duncan stared at the footage. "Where did you get this?" "From a dead man who didn't know he was recording his own obituary," Alexei replied. The alarm continued its rhythmic pulse. Through my earpiece, Apollo's voice, "Fire department's been called off. Someone overrode the alarm from the security office. Caspian's moving in anyway." "No," I subvocalized into the throat mic. "Wait for my signal." On the wall, my younger self was speaking. "The microdot system is perfect. Even if one list is compromised, the other remains secure. The field agents' names in one, the handlers in the other. Mutual assured destruction, intelligence style." Morrison's voice from behind the camera. "And you're comfortable with this, Orson? Creating lists of people who trust us?" Young me. "They're Soviet agents. They made their choice. Did they? Or did we make it for them?" Duncan lowered his gun slightly, fascinated despite himself. "This is authentic?" "As authentic as anything from that time," Alexei said. "Which is to say, it's true and false simultaneously." Blythe spoke for the first time since entering. "Orson, what is this?" I looked at my wife, my handler, and tried to see past 23 years of accumulated deception. "This is the truth, apparently, or a version of it." "The film," Duncan insisted, patience fraying. "The handler list. Where is it?" I held up the can I'd been carrying. "Right here. But before I give it to you, I want to know who you're really working for." "That's not how this works." "It is now, because in about 30 seconds, the FBI storms this booth. Unless you tell me who sent you." Duncan's jaw tightened. He glanced at his men, calculating odds. "You're bluffing." "Apollo," I said aloud. "Status." Apollo's voice echoed through the booth speakers I'd patched him into the sound system. 8 agents in position, awaiting your word." Duncan's gun came back up. "Call them off. After you answer my question." On the wall, the Berlin footage continued. Morrison was showing documents to the camera, lists of names, addresses, operational codes. Some I recognized. Others were strangers who'd been labeled as enemies for reasons that probably made sense to someone, somewhere. "Time's ticking, Victor," Alexei said pleasantly. "Though I suppose time is relative in our business. Orson here is the timekeeper, after all. He decides when the show starts and stops." "I'm independent," Duncan said finally. "Freelance. Bullshit." "It's true. The Soviet Union died, left us all orphans, so we found new parents. Corporations, criminals, whoever paid best." "Who's paying for this?" Duncan's eyes flicked to something behind me. "No, someone." I turned slowly. Standing in the doorway was Orion Taylor, my old handler, my friend for 30 years. He wore a beautiful suit and that Patek Philippe watch from 1962. "Hello, Orson," he said calmly. "I see we've reached the 3rd act." The booth felt suddenly airless. "You?" "Me. Always me. Since Berlin. Since before." He entered the booth and Duncan's men stepped aside respectfully. "I've been managing this operation for longer than you can imagine." "Managing what? The lists? The network?" "The narrative. The story we tell ourselves about who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. It's all theater, Orson. Always has been." "You're the handler Morrison reported to." Among others, Morrison was useful until he developed a conscience. Inconvenient things, consciences. I had to have him removed. And Blythe. Orion glanced at my wife with something that might have been pity. An inspired addition to the cast. Morrison recruited her, I inherited her. She never knew she was working for anyone except American intelligence. Blythe's face went pale. What? You thought you were protecting America from a dangerous double agent, Orion told her gently. Your husband, the man who'd lied to you about his CIA past. Morrison convinced you that watching him was patriotic duty. You son of a bitch, she breathed. Perhaps. But an effective one. He turned back to me. The handler list, Orson. The real one. I know you have it. Why do you want it? If you're the puppet master, you already know the names. Because I don't have all the names. The list was created by a joint committee I was only part of. There are handlers I don't know, people who could expose or eliminate me if they knew I was cleaning house. Cleaning house? Retiring loose ends. The old Cold Warriors are dying off naturally, but some need assistance. The world is changing. The old networks are becoming liabilities. So you're killing your own people? I'm evolving the operation for a new century. Think of it as restructuring. On the wall, the Berlin footage had reached the moment where Morrison asked, "What happens when the wall comes down?" My young voice answered, "Then we'll have won." Morrison, will we? Or will we just need new enemies to justify our existence? Prophetic words from a dead double agent. Alexei laughed softly. You still don't see it, do you, Orson? None of you do. We all turned to look at him. He was holding something, a small device with a single red button. Dead man's switch, he explained. I release this, and the entire booth goes up. Nitrate film is terrible about fire safety. There's no nitrate up here, I said. Isn't there? He gestured to a corner where several cans were stacked. I've been preparing for years. Enough nitrate to turn this booth into a crematorium. You're bluffing, Duncan said. Am I? I'm already dead, remember? Died in Miami 10 years ago. What's a ghost got to lose? Alexei, I said carefully, what do you want? I want the truth shown. The real film, the real lists, the real story. No more shadows on the cave wall. That's what I want too, Orion said smoothly. Give me the list, Orson, and we can expose everything. Full transparency. Your version of transparency, Alexei countered. Edited, redacted, shaped to serve your narrative. The alarm stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was deafening. Through my earpiece. Power's been cut to the whole building. Emergency generators kicking in. The main projector died, taking the Berlin footage with it. We stood in red emergency lighting. 7 people with enough secrets between us to rewrite history. I have a proposal, I said into that silence. Everyone waited. We show the film, tonight, as scheduled. The real one, with all the footage. Let the audience see everything, Berlin, the lists, all of it. Then let them decide what's true. The audience? Orion scoffed. They're civilians. They wouldn't understand. Or they'd understand too well, Alexei said. That we're all performers in a show that ran too long. The film goes public. People die, Duncan said. Real people with real families. People are already dying, I pointed out. At least this way, they know why. Blythe spoke up, voice steady despite everything. I want to see it, the footage. I want to know what I've been part of. You've been part of history, Orion told her. Or a lie that looks like history, she shot back. The emergency generators hummed louder, struggling with the load. The red lights flickered. Decision time, Alexei said, thumb hovering over the dead man's switch. What's it going to be? Truth or consequences? Both, I said, and pulled out the modified projector device Apollo and I had brought. We show everything, but with context, annotations, the truth about the lies and the lies about the truth. That's not how film works, Duncan protested. It is now. Digital overlay, frame by frame. Every deception exposed, every connection revealed. The complete story, not just fragments. Orion considered this. I could see him calculating angles, probabilities, outcomes. And afterward? Afterward, we all walk away. No arrests, no assassinations, no retributions. Everyone gets amnesia about everyone else. The FBI won't agree to that, Duncan said. They will if the alternative is a nitrate fire that destroys the evidence and kills civilians. Through my earpiece, Caspian's voice. Orson, what the hell is happening up there? Negotiating, I replied. Stand by. We have movement in the auditorium. Someone's evacuating the civilians quietly. Good. Fewer casualties if this went bad. I need an answer, Alexei said. My thumb's getting tired. Orion stepped forward. Show the film, but I control the narrative afterward. No, I said. Nobody controls it. It goes into the public domain. Let historians sort it out. That's chaos. That's democracy. Messy, inefficient, but ultimately self-correcting. You're naive. I'm tired. 30 years of keeping secrets, and for what? So you can play puppet master? So Duncan can sell information to the highest bidder? So my wife can live a lie she didn't even know she was living? The lights flickered again. Somewhere below, people were shouting. Choose, Alexei insisted. Truth or fire? I looked at each person in that booth. Duncan, the mercenary who'd lost his country and found capitalism. Orion, the handler who'd handled too much for too long. Blythe, the victim who'd become a collaborator without knowing it. Alexei, the dead man walking who wanted to burn it all down. The two gunmen, whose names I'd never know, following orders they probably didn't understand. And me, the timekeeper, holding on to the past like it could explain the present. I made my choice. Truth, I said, and handed Orion the film can. The real handler list, all of it. He opened it carefully, pulled out the film, held it up to the emergency light. His expression changed as he saw what was really there. This is blank, he said. No, I corrected. That's the truth. There is no handler list. There never was. Impossible. Think about it. Would the intelligence community really create a single document that could destroy everyone? The handler list is like the great MacGuffin. Everyone believes it exists, so it shapes behavior, but it's just blank film. But the microdot contains one name, Morrison's. He created it to blackmail you, Orion. The rest is just noise, random data that looks meaningful if you want it to. Orion stared at the film, then at me. You're lying. Am I? Or have you been chasing shadows for 30 years? Before anyone could respond, the main light suddenly blazed back on. The booth door slammed open and FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn. Nobody move! Caspian shouted. But Alexei did move. He smiled, released the dead man's switch and said, "Let there be light." Nothing happened. He looked at the device, puzzled. That's anticlimactic. I disabled the nitrate cans an hour ago, Apollo said from behind the FBI agents. Swap them for safety stock. Sorry, Alexei. Alexei laughed genuine, delighted laughter. Brilliant! The perfect ending, the bomb that wasn't, the list that isn't, the truth that's a lie. Pure cinema. Duncan tried to run, but the FBI already had him. His men surrendered without fighting. Orion stood perfectly still, calculating whether his diplomatic immunity, real or fabricated, would hold. Blythe looked at me across the chaos. Was any of it real? Our marriage? I don't know, I admitted. Was any of it real for you? She considered this. The Sunday screenings, those were real. Watching you share those films with the neighbors, seeing your face light up when the projection was perfect. That was real. Then that's what we keep. Caspian was cuffing Duncan, reading him his rights. Orion was showing credentials to another agent, probably fake but good enough to buy time. Alexei sat in the projectionist's chair, looking satisfied despite the anticlimax. Mr. Davis, he said, one more thing. The Berlin footage, it's yours. Morrison left instructions that if something happened to him, you should have it. Evidence of your innocence, he called it. Innocence? You were trying to do the right thing. In a world of double agents and false flags, you actually believed in something. That's either innocence or insanity, but either way, it's yours. I took the film can with the Berlin footage, felt its weight. 30 years of history in a metal container. What will you do now? I asked Alexei. What I've always done. Show films, tell stories. Remind people that everything they see is light projected through celluloid. The only difference is now I can use my real name. The FBI was clearing the booth, taking everyone except Alexei and me. As they led Blythe away, she turned back. Orson? That film you were going to show tonight, Casablanca? What about it? Show it anyway. The festival audience is still here. They came for a movie. She was right. Below in the auditorium, confused patrons were being allowed back in, taking their seats, expecting entertainment. I looked at Alexei. Want to help me thread up Casablanca? I thought you'd never ask. We worked together in comfortable silence, two old professionals preparing one more show. As the opening credits rolled and the audience settled, I thought about the handler list that never existed, the marriage that might have been real, the secrets that had shaped so many lives. You know what the beautiful thing about Casablanca is? Alexei asked as Bogart appeared on screen. What? Everyone thinks Rick is cynical, but he's actually a romantic. He just hides it better than most. Like intelligence officers? Like human beings. We watched Bogart and Bergman navigate their impossible love, and I wondered if that's what we'd all been doing, playing parts in a story we didn't fully understand, hoping for an ending that made sense of the beginning. The film ran on, perfect as always, and for 2 hours nobody thought about microdots or handler lists or the Cold War that never really ended. They just watched the light dance on the screen, creating illusions that felt more real than truth. That's the power of cinema. That's the danger of it, too. As Sam played As Time Goes By, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd take the Berlin footage and the blank handler list to the FBI. I'd tell them everything, the truth and the lies and the spaces between. Then I'd go home to my empty house, down to my vault, and continue what I'd always done, preserving the past, one frame at a time. Because that's what timekeepers do. We don't stop time or control it. We just mark its passage and try to save what we can from the inevitable decay. The film ended, the audience applauded, and somewhere in federal custody, the game of reels finally stopped spinning. Chapter 8. Saturday morning arrived gray and quiet, Los Angeles under a blanket of marine layer that made the whole city feel like a faded photograph. I sat in an FBI interview room that could have been anywhere: gray walls, gray table, gray chairs, even the coffee was gray. Across from me, Caspian Wilson looked like she'd aged 5 years in one night. Tell me again about the handler list, she said, voice hoarse from too many hours of interrogation. There isn't one. Never was. But Duncan believed what he was programmed to believe. Same as all of us. She pulled out a tablet, swiped through files. Orion Taylor's disappeared. His credentials were fake, but sophisticated enough to buy him 12 hours. By the time we figured it out, he was gone. He'll surface eventually. Men like Orion always do. You don't seem concerned that your former handler is on the loose. My former handler has been on the loose for 30 years. At least now we know it. She set down the tablet, rubbed her eyes. Your wife is cooperating. She's provided documentation going back 15 years, emails, recordings, financial transfers. She really didn't know she was working for foreign intelligence. I know. She wants to see you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. 23 years of marriage, even if it started as an operation, had created its own reality. Real conversations over breakfast, real arguments about money, real silence when her mother died. How do you parse authentic from artificial when they've been mixed for so long? The film, Caspian continued. The Berlin footage. We need it for evidence. I slid the can across the table. It's all there. 4 men planning an operation that was half real, half theater. Morrison knew it was being recorded. He was building insurance even then. Against who? Everyone. That's the thing about double agents, they trust nobody, including themselves. A knock on the door. Another agent entered, whispered something to Caspian. Her expression tightened. Duncan's dead, she said. I wasn't surprised. How? Heart attack. In federal custody. Under medical supervision. Cameras recording everything. Perfect heart attack. No signs of foul play. Like Volkov in Miami. Except Volkov survived his death. We're checking every death certificate from the last 20 years. How many more ghosts are out there? Does it matter? The Cold War's over. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like it just changed venues. She was right, of course. The war never ended. It just went underground, became corporate, digital, cultural. Instead of missiles, we had malware. Instead of propaganda films, we had social media. Same game, different pieces. There's something else, Caspian said. Flynn Johnson wants to make a deal. Treasury's got nothing on him. He was just insurance fraud, money laundering. He says he has information about the real handler network. Not a list, but a structure. How it operates, who funds it, where the bodies are buried. Literally? Probably. I thought about Flynn, the aggressive, handsome insurance assessor who'd inserted himself into our lives. Another performer in the grand show. What's he want in exchange? Immunity, new identity, the usual package. Give it to him. That's not my call. Then whose call is it? She smiled tightly. Yours, apparently. The director thinks you have unique insight into this situation. Officially, you're a consultant. Unofficially, you're the only one who knows where all the bodies are buried. I don't know anything. You know enough. You knew the handler list was fake. You knew Alexei was alive. You knew this would end at the TCM festival. I suspected. There's a difference. In our business, suspicion is intelligence. Our business. As if I was back in the game. As if I'd ever really left. Fine, I said. I'll talk to Flynn, but I want something in return. What? Ren Lopez. She's clean, just a lab tech who got caught in the crossfire. I want her cleared. No record, no surveillance. Done. Too easy. Which meant they'd already decided to cut her loose. And Alexei? What about him? He's dead, remember? Died in Miami 10 years ago. Let him stay that way. She considered this. A ghost running a projection booth could be useful. He just wants to show movies. Don't we all? Flynn Johnson looked smaller in custody, his gym-sculpted confidence deflated like a punctured balloon. He sat across from me in another gray room, hands cuffed to the table, trying to maintain the salesman's smile. Orson, he said like we were old friends. Hell of a show last night. You weren't there for the ending. I saw enough. Duncan getting arrested, your wife in cuffs, Orion vanishing like smoke. Oscar-worthy performances all around. What do you know about the handler network? He leaned back as far as the cuffs would allow. What's it worth to you? Your life, probably. Without a deal, you're looking at 20 years federal. With your looks, that won't be pleasant. The smile faltered. I need immunity. You need to give us something first. Proof you're not just another con man trying to trade nothing for something. He was quiet for a moment, calculating. November 1989, Berlin. 4 men in a room, planning something called Operation Odessa. One was you, one was Morrison, one was Orion Taylor. The 4th man, you never knew his real name, did you? I kept my face neutral. Jenkins from State. Not Jenkins. Jenkins was killed in 1988, replaced by a double. The man in that room was Yuri Volkov, Alexei's older brother. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible. I worked with Jenkins for 3 years. You worked with Yuri for 1 year. He was that good. Perfect English, perfect mannerisms, even had Jenkins' appendectomy scar recreated. Where's Yuri now? Running a hedge fund in Connecticut. $15 billion under management, half of it former Soviet money laundered through Luxembourg. He's the one who activated Duncan when the microdots surfaced. Why? Because his brother Alexei was supposed to be dead. If anyone found out Alexei was alive and projecting films in Hollywood, it would unravel everything. The fake death, the insurance fraud, the millions in assets that were redistributed. I thought about Alexei in the projection booth, threading Casablanca, claiming he just wanted to show movies. Another performance. So the whole thing was about money. It's always about money eventually. Ideology is just the marketing campaign. What else do you know? Flynn leaned forward, voice dropping. There are 17 more like Yuri, former Soviet intelligence who died and were reborn as American businessmen. They run everything from tech companies to pharmaceutical corporations. They're not spies anymore, they're capitalists, but they still have the old skills, the old networks. Names? I need a deal first. I stood to leave. Then we're done here. Wait. Desperation crept into his voice. I'll give you one name, as proof. I paused at the door. Serafina Garcia, the TCM festival programmer. I turned slowly. What about her? She's Yuri's daughter. Has been coordinating the film festival communication network for 5 years. Every screening, every restoration, every retrospective all cover for moving messages. I sat back down. Serafina, who'd been so helpful, so eager to have me involved with the festival. Another layer of the onion. If I get you immunity, I said, you give us everything, every name, every connection, every hidden account. And protection. These people don't forgive. Neither do I. We stared at each other across the gray table. Two men who'd wandered into a movie we didn't understand and were now trying to write our own ending. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Projection booth. 1 hour. Come alone. I showed it to Flynn. Recognize the number? He paled. That's Yuri. He wants to talk. An hour later, I stood in the empty Chinese theater, morning light filtering through the Art Deco lobby. The place felt different without an audience, like a church between services, all potential and no purpose. The projection booth was supposed to be sealed, crime scene tape across the door. But the tape was cut, the door ajar. I entered carefully, hand on the Glock I wasn't supposed to be carrying. Alexei was there, threading a new film onto the projector. Beside him stood a man who looked like an older, harder version of him, Yuri Volkov, a.k.a. Jenkins from State. Hello, Orson, Yuri said in perfect American English. Been a while. You've been dead for 30 years. Death is just a career change in our line of work. He gestured at the projector. Alexei's going to show you something. Then we're going to make you an offer. The lights dimmed. The projector started. On the screen below, grainy footage. A younger me in Berlin, but not the meeting from Morrison's briefcase camera. This was different, me alone in a safe house, talking to someone off camera. My voice from 30 years ago. The lists are incomplete. I've identified 3 more cells, but I'm keeping them off the official record. Off-camera voice. Why? Young me. Insurance, in case this goes sideways. Smart. What do you want in exchange for this insurance? Safe passage for one person. Someone who doesn't deserve to be on any list. Name? Blythe Morrison. She's nobody, just a student who got involved with the wrong person. But she'll be tagged as an asset if I don't intervene. The film stopped. The lights came up. I stood frozen, memory flooding back. You saved your wife before she was your wife, Yuri said. Romantic, really. You fell in love with her in Berlin. Knew Morrison was grooming her, so you made a deal. Her safety for your silence about those 3 cells. How do you have this? I was running the safe house. Every room was wired. He pulled out an old photograph. Blythe in Berlin, young, radiant, unaware of the forces circling her. She never knew you saved her. Never knew Morrison had marked her for recruitment. You kept that secret even after you married her. What do you want? The 3 cells you held back. The ones not on any list. Why? Because one of them is still active, still embedded, and they have something I need. After 30 years? Some investments mature slowly. I looked at Alexei, who was watching his brother with an unreadable expression. You knew about this? I knew Yuri was alive. I didn't know about your deal until last night, when he showed me the footage. So what's the offer? Yuri smiled, the same sad smile his brother wore. You give me the location of the 3 cells. I give you proof that your marriage was real, that Blythe loved you before Morrison got to her, that she stayed with you despite the operation, not because of it. More footage? Letters. Her letters to a friend in Boston, where she talks about the quiet American who saved her from a bad situation in Berlin, where she describes falling in love with someone she thinks is a projectionist but knows is something more. And if I refuse? Then the FBI gets this footage of you withholding intelligence. Your immunity deal evaporates. You spend your remaining years in federal prison. You'd burn me to get 3 names? I'd burn the world to protect my interests, but I'd prefer a peaceful transaction. I thought about Blythe, sitting in federal custody, probably wondering if any part of our life had been real. I thought about those 3 cells I'd protected, people who'd vanished into American life and never activated. I need to know what you want with them. One of them has a key, literally, a safety deposit box key to a bank in Zurich. Inside is seed money, $50 million in bearer bonds that were supposed to fund operations after the fall, money that legally doesn't exist. And the other two? Window dressing. I'll leave them alone. I want the letters first. Half now, half after. He pulled out a manila envelope, handed it over. Inside, Blythe's handwriting, young and hopeful. There's this man at the cinema, American, I think. He watches the films like they might disappear if he looks away. I want to know what he sees in all that light and shadow. My throat tightened. This was real. Before Morrison, before the lies, before the operation, she'd seen me. The cells, Yuri prompted. I gave him 2 addresses from memory. The third I wrote on a piece of paper, handed it over. He read it, nodded, pulled out another envelope. The rest of her letters. There's one from after you were married you should read, about why she stayed even after Morrison told her who you really were. I took the envelope, felt its weight. We're done here? Almost. He gestured to Alexei. My brother has something for you. Alexei handed me a film can. The original Third Man. The one we watched in Berlin, remember? You, me, Morrison, and Yuri pretending to be Jenkins. 4 spies watching a movie about a spy. The irony was too perfect. Why give me this? Because someone should remember that night honestly, before everything went wrong, when we were just 4 men who loved cinema enough to risk our lives for it. The Volkov brothers stood together, aging ghosts of a dead empire. Then Yuri checked that vintage Patek Philippe watch, not from 1962 after all, but close enough, and smiled. Time to go. New identities to manage, hedge funds to run, the American dream, Soviet style. What about Orion? Still out there, probably planning another operation. Men like him don't retire. They just find new wars to fight. They left together, and I stood alone in the projection booth with 2 envelopes and a film can. Evidence of love, betrayal, and the thin line between them. I threaded the Third Man onto the projector, started it running. Sat in the booth watching Harry Lime scheme and die in the sewers of Vienna while Los Angeles woke up outside. When the film ended, I called Caspian. I found Flynn's intelligence. Sending it over now. What about the Volkovs? What Volkovs? One's been dead for 10 years, the other for 30. She was quiet for a moment. You're learning the game. I invented the game. I just forgot the rules for a while. Your wife's asking for you again. Tell her I'll come tomorrow, after I figure out what's real. I hung up, packed the letters and the film, and left the Chinese theater for what I thought would be the last time. But theaters are like old operations, you never really leave them. They follow you home in the flicker of light on walls, in the shadows between frames. That afternoon I sat in my vault, reading Blythe's letters by the light of an editing bench. She'd loved me before she knew who I was. She'd stayed after she found out. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Outside, Los Angeles churned on, unaware that its story had been rewritten in a projection booth by men who didn't exist, over a list that was never real, for reasons that changed depending on who was telling them. But that's the nature of truth in our business. It's not about what happened, but about who controls the narrative. And for the first time in 30 years, nobody was controlling mine. The projector in my mind finally stopped running, and in the silence between features I heard something I'd forgotten existed. The sound of my own thoughts, unscripted and unedited. Tomorrow, I'd face Blythe. Tonight, I'd watch The Third Man again and remember 4 spies in Berlin, before we knew the wall would fall, before we understood that every ending is just another beginning in disguise. The timekeeper had finally stopped keeping anyone's time but his own. Chapter 9. The Los Angeles County Courthouse looked like a mausoleum designed by someone who'd confused justice with geometry, all right angles, and no mercy. 3 weeks after the TCM festival disaster, I sat in a conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and broken marriages, watching my life get divided like a film reel being spliced. Atticus Moore sat beside me. his Parkinson's tremor barely visible as he arranged documents with the precision of someone who'd spent 50 years turning chaos into precedent. Across from us, Blythe's lawyer, a shark in Armani named Garrett Richardson, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Your client's facing federal charges," Atticus said mildly. "This isn't a normal divorce proceeding." "My client was manipulated by foreign agents," Richardson countered. "She's a victim, not a perpetrator." I watched this tennis match of legal language, thinking about those letters from Berlin. Young Blythe writing about the quiet American who watched films like they might disappear. Had that woman ever really existed, or had I invented her from light and shadow? "The film collection is separate property," Atticus continued. "Acquired before marriage, maintained with separate funds, documented meticulously, but improved with marital assets. The climate control system, the security upgrades, necessary maintenance, not improvements." Richardson shuffled his papers, and I saw something that made my chest tighten. A photograph had slipped out. Our wedding day. Blythe in white, me in a rental tux, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. We looked so young, so certain that love conquered all. "Mr. Davis," Richardson addressed me directly, "my client wishes to make a statement." The door opened. Blythe entered, escorted by a federal marshal. House arrest had aged her, or maybe it had just stripped away the makeup and pretense. She looked smaller, grayer, more like the student in Berlin than the real estate mogul she'd become. "Orson," she said, sitting down carefully like she might break. "Blythe, I need you to know." She stopped, started again. "Morrison told me you were selling secrets, that watching you was protecting America. I believed him because it was easier than believing you'd lied to me for years about who you were. I did lie. About being CIA, not about loving me." The room went quiet, except for the fluorescent hum. "I found the letters," I said. "Your letters from Berlin, before Morrison got to you." Her face crumpled slightly. "You kept them?" "Yuri Volkov had them. Insurance, apparently." "I don't remember writing them." "You wrote about a quiet American who watched films like they might disappear." "Did they? Disappear?" "Everything disappears eventually. We just try to preserve what we can." Richardson cleared his throat. "About the settlement." "She can have the house," I said, surprising everyone, including myself. "I'll keep the vault and the collection. The savings accounts, split them. She'll need money for lawyers." "That's generous," Atticus said carefully. "It's practical. I can't live there anymore. Too many ghosts." Blythe looked at me with something that might have been gratitude or grief. "The Sunday screenings. For the neighbors. Those were real, weren't they?" "As real as anything gets in Hollywood." The marshal stood, time was up. As they led her away, she turned back. "That film you were going to show that night, Casablanca. Rick lets Ilsa go in the end." "He does." "Was that a message?" "It was just a movie, Blythe. Sometimes that's all it is." But we both knew I was lying. After she left, Richardson packed up his papers with the efficiency of someone billing by the hour. "She's looking at 3 to 5 years, best case. Could have been worse. Could have been better. Could have been a lot of things, Mr. Davis. Life's not a movie." "No," I agreed. "Movies have better lighting." That afternoon, I met Caspian Wilson at a coffee shop in Silver Lake, one of those places where the baristas had more degrees than the lawyers. "Flynn Johnson's singing," she said without preamble. "Names, dates, entire networks." "Good for him. He mentioned someone you should know about, Ophelia Martinez." The name rang a bell, distant, muffled. "Blythe's friend? The investor?" "More than that. Johnson says she's been running the West Coast operation for 15 years. Real estate's perfect for money laundering cash purchases, foreign buyers, inflated appraisals." "And Blythe?" "Unwitting accomplice. Martinez used her to get to you, then let Duncan think he was running the show." I stirred my coffee, watching the cream spiral like a fingerprint. "Where's Martinez now?" "Wind, but we'll find her. People like that always surface." "Like Orion Taylor?" Caspian's expression tightened. "Different category. Taylor's protected. Martinez is expendable." "Everyone's expendable eventually." "Cynical. Experienced." She pulled out a folder, slid it across. Your immunity deal, signed, sealed, delivered. You're officially nobody again. I opened it, read the dense legal language that essentially said I'd never existed in any operational capacity. My 30 years in intelligence, erased with better grammar. What about the collection? Yours, free and clear, though the Academy's interested if you ever want to donate. I'm thinking about it, parts of it anyway. The nitrate films, everything except the personal prints. Those stay with me. She studied me over her coffee. You're really walking away from all of it? I'm walking away from the game. The films, those are different. Those are history. History's just another game. Maybe. But at least with film, you can see the splices. Chapter 10. The knock came at 3 a.m., sharp and deliberate, the kind that says, I know you're awake, even when you weren't. I grabbed the Glock from the nightstand, approached the door carefully. Through the peephole, a woman in her 50s, elegant even at this ungodly hour, Ophelia Martinez. I'm alone, Orson, she said to the closed door, and I'm here to make you an offer. I could have called the FBI. Should have. Instead, I opened the door, keeping the gun visible but not aimed. Miss Martinez, you're supposed to be in the wind. Wind changes direction. She entered uninvited, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never met a room she didn't own. May I sit? You've got 5 minutes before I call Caspian. She settled into my reading chair like she'd been there before. Maybe she had, during one of Blythe's parties I'd avoided. Flynn Johnson's talking, she said, telling stories about me that are mostly true. But he doesn't know the real story, which is that I've been protecting you for 15 years. I laughed, couldn't help it. Protecting me? You sent Duncan after my collection. I sent Duncan after Duncan. He was getting reckless, drawing attention. The collection was bait. Blythe was never supposed to get this involved. She was meant to be your handler, yes, but a passive one. Morrison recruited her. I inherited her, kept her dormant, until Duncan forced my hand. I sat across from her, gun on my lap. Why protect me? Because you have something I need. Not the list those were always theater. Something else. What? She pulled out a photograph, handed it over. It was old, black and white, taken somewhere tropical, a young couple on a beach laughing. The woman looked familiar. Your mother, she said, and my father, 1962, Cuba, 3 months before the missile crisis. The room tilted. That's impossible. Your mother was CIA, stationed in Havana. My father was DGI, Cuban intelligence. They fell in love, tried to defect together. She made it out. He didn't. My mother was a teacher in Ohio. After Cuba, the agency gave her a new identity, a new life. You were born 2 years later. Your father, the one who raised you, never knew. I studied the photo, looking for lies in the grain. But the woman's eyes, I'd seen those eyes in the mirror every morning. What do you want? My father left something with your mother. Documents about Operation Northwoods, the real one, not the sanitized version. Plans for false flag operations that would have started World War III. Your mother was supposed to be his insurance, but she disappeared into Ohio in silence. She's been dead for 10 years. But you have her things. In storage unit 447 in Glendale. I've looked everywhere else. How did you... I've been watching you since you returned from Berlin, protecting you from people who wanted those documents for different reasons. Duncan was just the latest. And if I give them to you, I disappear. For real this time. The FBI gets a package with enough evidence to close 17 cases. Your wife gets a reduced sentence. And you get answers about who your mother really was. I thought about my mother dying of cancer in a Columbus hospital, whispering about needing to tell me something but never finding the words. Had she been trying to confess? I need proof, I said. She pulled out another photograph. My mother, older, standing next to a storage unit. The number was visible. 447. She went there every year on the same date, October 22nd, the anniversary of the missile crisis ending. I think she was visiting the past. I stood, walked to the window. Los Angeles was dark except for the endless constellation of streetlights, each one illuminating its own small drama. I'll need 2 days, I said. You have one. Duncan wasn't the only one looking for these documents. After she left vanishing into a Uber that had probably been circling for exactly 5 minutes, I sat in the dark, holding the photograph of my maybe mother and her Cuban lover. Another layer of deception, another frame in the endless reel of lies. At dawn, I drove to Glendale. Storage Unit 447 was paid up through the end of the decade automatic payments from an account I'd never examined closely. The lock was old, but well-maintained. Inside, boxes of my mother's things I'd never had the heart to sort through. And in the back, a film can. Inside wasn't film, but papers, wrapped in oilcloth. Spanish and English, stamped with classifications that had expired, but still felt dangerous. Operation Northwoods. But more than that, names of American officers willing to kill American citizens for political theater. One name stopped me cold. Orion Taylor, Lieutenant, United States Army Intelligence, my handler, my friend. A man who'd been willing to murder innocents when he was young and apparently hadn't changed much with age. I photographed everything, then called Caspian. "I have Ophelia Martinez's location," I said, "and something else you need to see." The arrest was anticlimactic. Ophelia didn't run, didn't resist. She sat in her hotel room at the Chateau Marmont, sipping wine and watching Sunset Boulevard on TCM, waiting for them like she'd been waiting all her life. "Did you find them?" she asked me as they cuffed her. "Yes. And your father was trying to do the right thing. So was my mother." That's all I wanted to know. As they led her away, she turned back. "Check the false bottom in the can. Your mother left you something." I did later in the evidence room with Caspian watching. Under the documents was an envelope with my name in my mother's handwriting. Inside, a single paragraph. "My darling son, I was not who you thought I was, but my love for you was the only thing in my life that was never a lie. The past is gone. Let it stay buried, but know that everything I did to ensure you'd live in a better world, even if that world could never know the truth." It was signed with her operational code name, Timekeeper. The word hit me like a punch. I'd inherited more than her eyes. "Jesus," Caspian breathed. "You were literally born into this. We're all born into something. I just found out what..." Chapter 11. The nightmare started a week after Ophelia's arrest. Not violent, nothing so cinematic. Just endless corridors of film cans, each one opening to reveal another secret, another lie, another person who wasn't who they claimed to be. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., sheets soaked, reaching for films that weren't there. Dr. Martin's office was in Westwood, walking distance from UCLA, where eager film students dissected movies without knowing that sometimes movies dissected you right back. He was older than me, Vietnamese, with hands that moved like he was conducting invisible symphonies. "PTSD, he said after our third session. "Not from combat, but from constant deception. Your mind's been in fight-or-flight mode for 30 years. Longer, apparently. Since birth, if you believe the documentation." Do you believe it? I thought about my mother, teaching high school history in Ohio, grading papers at our kitchen table. Had she been remembering Cuba, planning operations, or just being a mother? I believe everyone has multiple stories running simultaneously, like a multiplex different films on different screens, but all in the same building. And which film are you watching now? I'm trying to watch The Restoration. The Sunday screening started again in October. Not at my old house. Blythe would get that in the settlement, but in a small theater I'd rented in Los Feliz. Word spread through the retirement homes and senior centers. The Timekeeper was showing films again. Harold Wilson was first to arrive, still wearing his USS Missouri cap. His wife Margaret had died 2 weeks after the TCM incident, heart failure. Nothing suspicious, just time running out. She loved these screenings, he said, taking his usual seat. Said they made her feel young. What did you pick for tonight? Singin' in the Rain. She always laughed at that scene with the diction coach. I threaded up the print, a beautiful IB Technicolor copy that had cost me a fortune in 1995. As Gene Kelly danced through that fabricated rain, I watched Harold's face in the projection light. He was crying, but smiling too. That's what films did. They let you feel multiple things simultaneously, without having to choose. Willa Brown from the Academy came by the next week, bringing a proposal. "Digital restoration project," she said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. "We want to preserve your collection, but keep the prints in your possession. Best of both worlds." "Who's funding it?" "Anonymous donor, very generous. Only condition is that the films be made available for public screening once a month." I knew who the donor was. Yuri Volkov, washing his guilt through charity. But dirty money could still preserve clean art. "I have conditions," I said. "Ren Lopez oversees the technical work. And we train apprentices, young people who need to learn the physical craft, not just the digital one." "Done. And one more thing. No questions about provenance. Some of these films have complicated histories. All films have complicated histories. That's what makes them interesting." We shook hands, and I felt something ease in my chest. The collection would survive me, would continue telling stories long after I was gone. Ren arrived the next morning with 3 film students from USC. They looked impossibly young, born after the wall fell, after the Cold War ended, after everything that had defined my generation dissolved into history. "This is Mr. Davis," Ren told them. "He's going to teach you about physical film preservation." "Like actual film?" one asked. "Not digital? Actual film. The kind that burns if you're not careful." I led them down to the vault, watched their eyes widen at the shelves of cans. 3,000 films, 30 years of collecting, a lifetime of preservation. "First lesson," I said, pulling out a can. "Every film is 3 things: what it claims to be, what it actually is, and what it becomes in the watching. Your job as a preservationist is to maintain all 3. "I don't understand," one student said. I opened the can, showed them the leader. "See this splice? Someone cut this film, removed 3 frames. Why? Censorship? Damage? Artistic choice? We don't know. But we preserved the splice along with the film because the edit is now part of the history. Like scars," another student offered. "Exactly like scars." We worked for hours, examining prints, checking for vinegar syndrome, measuring shrinkage. I taught them the old terms: changeover cues, cigarette burns, academy leader. Dead language for a dying art, but somehow in their young hands, it felt like resurrection. Chapter 12. The letter from federal prison arrived on a Tuesday, Blythe's handwriting still elegant despite the circumstances. "Orson, they're moving me to minimum security next month. Good behavior, apparently. Who knew I had it in me? I've been thinking about our Sunday screenings, how you'd stand in the projection light, explaining aspect ratios or film stocks, and I'd watch the audience watch you, seeing their faces change as they understood something new. That was real, wasn't it? The teaching, the sharing. I'm sorry I became part of something that tried to steal that from you. Morrison convinced me I was protecting America. Duncan convinced me I was protecting our future. But I think I was just protecting myself from the truth that I'd married a man I never really knew. Except I did know you. The you that mattered. The man who saved films and showed them to neighbors and believed preservation was a form of love. That man, I loved. Still do. Blythe P.S. They show movies here on Fridays. Last week was The Shawshank Redemption. I laughed inappropriately. I wrote back, "Blythe, everything was real, except the parts that weren't. The Sunday screenings, yes. The quiet mornings, yes. The way you looked in candlelight at that restaurant in Santa Barbara, absolutely. I'm reopening the vault to the public. Small screenings, mostly for seniors and students. Teaching the next generation what film means beyond pixels and streaming. Your sentence is almost over, so is mine in a way. 30 years of keeping secrets finally done. Be well. Get free. Find your own films to preserve. Orson." The final legal proceedings wrapped up in December. Duncan Smith Victor Chenkov had died in custody, but his network had been rolled up. 27 arrests across 6 countries. Ophelia Martinez pled guilty, got 15 years, would be out in 7 with good behavior. Flynn Johnson entered witness protection, probably selling insurance in Nebraska under a name that suited him better. Orion Taylor was never found. Some said Cuba, some said Moscow. I think he never left Los Angeles, just changed faces again, became someone else watching from the shadows. Men like him don't retire, they just change reels. The Academy event was Serafina Garcia's idea. A celebration of preservation, she called it, though we both knew it was really a funeral for the old ways. She'd been cleared of any involvement Yuri Volkov had used her festival without her knowledge. She seemed smaller now, dimmed by the proximity to deception. "I keep thinking about all those screenings," she said, setting up chairs in the restored theater. "How many messages were passed while I was introducing films? How many secrets in the light?" Does it matter? The films were still shown. People still watched. Art still happened. Alongside espionage. Alongside life. It's all happening simultaneously, the beautiful and the corrupt, the truth and the lies. That's what cinema teaches us. Multiple realities can coexist in the same frame. That night, I showed The Third Man to an audience of preservationists, academics, and survivors of Hollywood's golden age. Before the screening, I stood at the podium, looking out at faces illuminated by house lights that would soon dim. "Film preservation isn't about saving the past," I said. "It's about maintaining the possibility of multiple interpretations. Every time we screen these films, they mean something different. Every generation sees new shadows in the same light." Tonight's film is about a man discovering his friend isn't who he thought. It's about post-war Vienna, divided and confused. It's about morality in ruins. But mostly, it's about the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of betrayal. 30 years ago, I watched this film in Berlin with 3 other men. We were all spies, all liars, all believers in different versions of the truth. One is dead, one disappeared, one became someone else. I'm the only one still watching. So I keep watching. Not because the film changes, but because I do. Every screening, I'm someone different. The idealistic intelligence officer, the paranoid collector, the betrayed husband, the keeper of time. Tonight, I'm just a man who loves movies, sharing that love with others who understand that preservation is an act of faith. Faith that someone someday will need to see these shadows dance again. The lights dimmed. The projector started. Harry Lime schemed and died, while Vienna's sewers waited to swallow secrets. In the booth, Wren and her students changed reels with careful precision. Below, the audience leaned forward, drawn into a story they'd seen before but were seeing anew. I stood in the back, watching the watchers, thinking about my mother in Cuba, young and in love with the wrong man. About Blythe in Berlin, writing letters to a future she couldn't imagine. About Morrison, recording everything while serving everyone and no one. The film ran on, perfect and unchanging, while everything around it transformed. That's the beauty of preservation. It holds still while we move, maintains its truth while we revise ours, keeps playing long after we've stopped. After the screening, after the wine and conversation and careful laughter, I drove home to the Hollywood Hills. The house was different now, smaller, rented, no vault underneath. The collection was stored professionally, accessible but not obsessive. I sat on the deck looking out at Los Angeles, that impossible city of dreams and lies. Somewhere out there, Orion was watching. Somewhere, the Volkov brothers were running their hedge fund. Somewhere, other secrets were being buried or exposed. But here now, I was just Orson Davis. Not the timekeeper, not the spy, not the betrayed husband. Just a man who'd learned that the most powerful thing you can do with the past is let it become history. I went inside, threaded up my one remaining personal print Casablanca, the film that started everything. As Rick and Ilsa said goodbye in the fog, I thought about endings that were really beginnings, about the beautiful friendship that starts when the romance ends. Tomorrow I'd teach students about splice marks and edge codes. Tomorrow I'd catalog another donation to the archive. Tomorrow, I'd write to Blythe about the possibility of forgiveness. But tonight, I just watched the film, letting its light fill the darkness, its shadows dance on my wall. The projector hummed its mechanical lullaby, and for the first time in 30 years, I fell asleep without checking the locks. The war was over. The peace was just beginning. And somewhere in the space between frames, in that darkness the eye can't see, the truth waited patiently to be discovered again. What strikes me most about Orson's story isn't the espionage or betrayal, but how he chose preservation over destruction of films, relationships, and even painful truths. His decision to transform his private collection into a public trust, teaching the next generation about physical film while reconciling with a past built on lies, shows that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply choosing to illuminate rather than bury our shadows. Makes you wonder, What are we all preserving that might be preserving us?